So I get the joy and honor of introducing Marty. One thing I wanted to, if you're a TBR practitioner, would you raise your hand? Because I know we had a lot of practitioners joining us, so we're really excited for the work you guys are doing. So I'm not going to read the whole thing, but in your agenda you have this amazing information about Marty, and I don't even know where to start. I really don't. But by the end of today, you're going to be like, you understand why I'm completely tongue-tied, and how, like, when I had to pick her up from the airport, I'm really nervous, like picking up a superstar. Just like I had to spend a whole hour in the car with Marty Smith, and so she's amazing, and she's been closer. Okay, I can hear myself. So anyway, she's amazing. So she's with us today. Came from Austin. And she's going to be sharing how, well, one thing we talked about in the cards, we all have a nervous system, so everything she talks about is about every single person in this room, in addition to the children for whom we care and the other people that we love. I was telling her that I listened to her book, which, by the way, if you want to get the Audible version, Marty reads it. So if you want to just have Marty's voice with you always, it's a wonderful way to do that. I read or listened to her book a month after my mother died, and my mother had been on hospice in 3 months in my home. And as I was listening to Marty read her book, so many times I thought, if I'd known this, I could have helped my mother to be more comfortable in her last days. I see some nodding heads. And it really hit me then that we're all the same. We're all human beings, and we all have the same needs. And that's what Marty's going to share with us today. And so everything is hers now. So go for it. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much, Liz. That's a lot to follow. I hope I made the hype for you guys. My goal today is to have a good time and to have some fun. And I really do take the job seriously of trying to bring little micro moments of joy. I work a lot with Dr. Bruce Perry. He is one of the grandfathers of child trauma work. And one of the things he talks a lot about is dosing, and how just those small little things that we can do that bring joy will carry us through those hard times. And so I'm not going to stand up here and tell you that I'm going to make your lives easy, because I can't. There's no way that I can do that. But what I can do is help you understand your nervous system a little bit better and understand how the sensory systems impact how we view the world, and potentially give you those micro moments of joy that will sustain you through the really hard times that we all know are coming. And I love, one of my admins gave me this little cup here, and it says, the little things are the big things. And so it is not an accident that I did this. It is not an accident that I am donned in daisies. I carved them into my head for this conference. I am here to spark joy and bring joy, hopefully, to this room. I know this afternoon there will be lots of giggles and laughs as we get out the Lycra and the bubbles and the balloons, and we practice some of the things that we're talking about today. Before I even get started, I wanted to just say I'm so grateful that everybody has the book, that we were able to gift that to everybody. I have 2 books that I've written. This one was written with Dr. David Cross, who is the co-founder of TBRI, and he helped me, and Darren helped me, and a lot of my TBRI friends and Dr. Perry also helped me with this book. And then I wrote another book called Sensory Healing After Developmental Trauma. And this is my newer book. This is based on Dr. Perry's work more than TBRI, so it kind of gives you a brain-based behavioral analysis. Unfortunately, this one is an actual publisher, and they won't give me copies for less than $20 a book. So you can get them cheaper than I can if you buy them individually. So I wasn't able to gift everybody these, but if you want it, it is out there. I'm gonna show you at the end of this morning a app that we have created, my husband and I, that will pretty much, you'll be able to enter in the symptomology or the behaviors or the things that you're seeing, and it will give you an OT perspective guide based in Bruce Perry's work, Dr. Perry's work, of how to best help that child. So this book, it kind of breaks that down. It's a little more technical, it's not as friendly. And I will laugh because Liz was saying that, you can hear my voice if you listen to the Audible book of this. And it's literally me in my closet with a blanket over my head. And this is like so low budget. So it's really, really fun for me to stand up here and have people tell me how the book has changed their life, because I wrote it in 3 months, because I tend to be a person that says something needs to happen. and I look around and say, no one else is doing it. Okay, I'll do it myself. And so that's kind of where this book came from, is I wanted the connected child and the connected therapist to have a little bit more therapy background. So I did that. The other thing, a couple months ago, I realized a lot of Spanish resources were being taken off of websites, and that made me mad. So again, I looked around. I don't speak Spanish, friends. I took 3 years in high school. My mom teaches Spanish. My husband is a native Spanish speaker because he was born in Honduras, but he is as gringo as they come, has lost all of his Spanish, but I outsourced it because I live in Austin with a very Hispanic community, and I rallied my friends and we translated the book. So I have translated The Connected Therapist. It's in a lot of other languages that I wasn't involved in, but the Spanish one, it means something to me because we crowdsourced it and did that. So I have 2 copies that are actual, they're the speaker copies, and we changed the name. I talked to one of the TBRI people, and Katie Rinaldo, she was like, actually, that's not how you would say The Connected Therapist in Spanish. I'm like, that's great, because these are friends of mine that helped me translate it. So it is what it is. But I have these 2 copies that I would love to gift to someone who is working with Hispanic population. I see 2 hands over here. Okay. Can I have you? So there you go. I hope that's enough about me. And I'm going to turn this on so I can be a little more free. All right. Are we live? Yep, we are live. Okay, perfect. So today we're going to talk about sensory healing after developmental trauma, which happens to be the book, the name of my second book, because that's what I talk about a ton. So before we even get started, these are some of the core tenets that I believe in. And I have worked with Dr. Bruce Perry. I was part of the ground team that got the neurosequential model of therapeutics started. My husband actually wrote the code for that project. I've been doing TBRI for 20 years now. I met Dr. Karen Purvis before it got really, really big. So these are things that I've been studying for 20 years. And I work a lot with Robin Goebel. She and I do a training thing on Wednesdays called Being With that she has written. And we met at a TBRI training. When we got our practitioner trainings, we sat at the same table. And so Robin Goebel is a good friend of mine. We are like one of my dearest friends. I just had coffee with her yesterday. And we are trying to bring these TBRI, NMT, Dr. Porges, all of these things into the world. The other thing that you might not know is that Robin has a group called The Club that is specifically for parents of kids with big baffling behaviors. She wrote the book, Raising Kids with Big Baffling Behaviors, and she has an online community called The Club, where I am active in there as well. You can ask questions, you can get support, and we're living the principles of bringing community to the most vulnerable. So she's got some quotes, and she's got some fancy ways of saying things, and I just love to repeat them. And the first one I want to say is focus on the nervous system to change behavior. Any amount of consequence and reward, we tried that in the 80s, doesn't work as well as building relationships with people and motivating them to change from within, or sometimes acknowledging that they don't have to change and adapting things to better meet their needs through our regulation. Changing how we see people changes people. Show of hands, has anyone ever been mentored or poured into or loved by someone who was non-judgmental of you? Raise your hand if you've ever had that. And if you haven't, I hope to help you find that today. But it will change your life to have someone see you as someone better than you imagine you can be. That is life-changing. Just that principle alone, believing the best in people, will change people. And oppositional behavior indicates a lack of felt safety. Nobody wants to be a jerk. It's just not the way humans are made. When we are a jerk, it's because we feel like we can't get our needs met any other way. And we'll talk some more about that a little bit later. And then also, when your nervous system is fried, you don't have the resources to make big changes for healing. Instead, you have to have tiny moments of healing, and that's directly out of Bruce Perry's work. And he talks a lot about dosing and thinking about, you can get a giant shot of antibiotic and it will mess your system, right? But imagine most antibiotics that we take are small doses over time. And those small doses over time are what actually cause long-term change for our systems. And so that's what we're going to talk about today is what are these tiny things that we can do that will relax the nervous system so that we are not in that protective mode. And I like to talk about you're either in connection mode or you're in protection mode. And there's very little in between. And when we are in connection mode, that's when we're our best self. And that's where Dr. Karen Purvis would say, I've never met a true self that I didn't fall in love with. And so these kids that we have a hard time falling in love with, because I work with them, I also work in Austin at a care farm, and so we work a lot with the judicial systems, and we bring in a lot of youth that have been hurt by people, so they can't talk to people, they can't be healed by people, and we heal them through the animals, and we build trust with the animals, and then that trust is transferred over to us therapists. So it's that idea that we have to connect with them in order to help change those nervous systems, and we have to find a way to decrease that protective mode to get into the connected mode. So with that in mind, let's talk about your actual nervous system. And this is a great analogy. Several other neurology people have talked about this, but I love the imagery of thinking of how many neural synapses we have. In the beginning of this, we're going to talk until our first break, which will be 10:30-ish, maybe, something like that. We're going to talk kind of about the neurology and why the nervous system is the key to behavioral change. And then we'll talk about specific strategies to help the nervous system interpret things differently, right? But to understand why we make the decisions we do, to understand why we behave the way that we do, we have to understand a little bit of neurochemistry. And we have to understand that the human brain has 100 billion neurons, right? And then over 100 trillion synaptic connections. So your neurons are little cell bodies that have little projections that come out of them, and then those projections connect to other neurons through these synapses. So we talk about neural pathways. It's the idea that these little neurons are connected. And in my book, I talk about how we're born with all the neurons we're going to have. We actually have debunked that study now that we're doing fMRIs, but it is not a significant amount. The majority of the ones we have, we are born with, right? So they're all in the back of your brain. They're down in the brainstem and in the midbrain and the limbic system. You don't have a whole lot of frontal cortex connection when you're born. That's why you cannot reason with an infant. You can't look at an infant and say, I am making the bottle, I'll be there in a moment. You can't look at an infant and say, I'm in the middle of a meeting, we can't have this. Like none of that gets through because the synapses have not been formed. It takes experiences to create those synapses. So every micro experience that you encounter moves these neurons from the back of your brain forward. And I like to imagine they're little marathon runners. My little neurons are little marathon runners. And they're all in the back of my brain and they're, I'm born and they're all like, all right, let's do this. And then I see a daisy and my little neurons decide, I like daisies. And so they hold hands and they make a little daisy chain that says Marty Smith is going to like daisies. And then later in life, I see a daisy and I already have that neurosynaptic pathway. And so I still like daisies. This is great. And then sometimes something might happen that harms me with daisies. Hasn't happened to me yet, obviously. But if it did, then I might decide that those little guys are going to unlink hands and I'm going to no longer like daisies, right? So they are not static, they are dynamic. Neurosynapses are dynamic. And they move around. But to think about, we have more neural synapses in our brain than the Milky Way has stars. Can you imagine that? That is how complex our brains are, and they all connect different ways. And then we have all these 11 million sensory receptors that fire each second. And then 4 times a second, those receptors are sending signals to my thalamus, part of my brain, that says, am I safe or not safe? So real quick, I would like for everyone to say the words safe or unsafe. Safe or unsafe. Your brain has already calculated that 16 times. And the time it takes you to ask the question, your brain has already formed its own opinion based on those 11 trillion bits of information that are coming into your brain per second. Now, we can't possibly process all of that information. right? So how do we know what to attend to? We're settled in right now, so all the noises that you noticed when you first got here, you don't notice anymore. But if I point them out to you, your attention will shift because I am in authority right now. I'm holding the microphone, right? How do you become an expert? You stand in front of 40 or more people and show them slides, right? I'm your expert. If I start to say, do you hear the clashing plates in the back? Now you do. And as I talk for the next 3 seconds or 4 seconds, you're going to still hear them, but you didn't maybe hear them before. Some of you maybe did, because it's a high-pitched noise, and high-pitched noises go in the nervous system a different way than a low-frequency noise. Nobody heard the motor of the air conditioner because it's a low-frequency hum. But our neurodivergent people who do hear these things with a higher caliber, they notice those things more than we do, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But the whole point of this is that we're constantly trying to figure out, what do I attend to and what do I not? Based on, is it going to keep me safe or is it going to kill me? So we only prioritize safety and homeostasis. So of those 11 million sensory receptors sending us data, the brain cortex only attends to 40 or 50 of them. Let that sink in. That's like looking at the Big Dipper and not seeing the rest of the sky. That's pretty significant. And then our attention is based on predictions from past experiences based and varied between individuals. And that, if you've not read Dr. Bruce Perry's newest book called What Happened to You, he wrote with Oprah, highly recommend it. He reads it himself as well. He and Oprah read it together. I'm not entirely convinced. I have not had a chance, that opportunity to ask him, and I don't know if it would be appropriate to ask him, but I want to be like, did y'all just record a session between the two of you and make it a book? Because that's kind of what it feels like, one of her interviews where they talk back and forth. So I'm not even sure there was writing going on there. I think they just interviewed each other. But he does talk about things being on his nightstand, and so yeah, jury's still out on that. So let's look through the lens of trauma. Kids don't end up in the foster care system without some sort of traumatic experience or event. So we know that these kids have come in with past experiences. So Mike, I'm going to have Mike come up here for just a second. And I want to really drive home the point of how do our 11 trillion synapses communicate with each other. So I have a little experiential event, and Mike is going to play this video for you. And I want you just to watch it. I know, right? It's bacon. Where are my vegans? Any vegans out there, vegetarians, people that hate bacon? Great. I hate bacon. I'm not a vegan, but I hate bacon. I'm a little weird. It's okay. So, watching bacon in a pan, I want to know who can hear bacon right now. Raise your hands really high so other people can see you. You can hear this, right? That's funny. It's on mute. Who can smell bacon? Who smells it? Yeah, you smell the bacon. There's no bacon. I didn't pump the smell into this room for you. Who's having an emotional response right now? I think everybody. Maybe you're salivating and you're hungry. Who wants to give me a personal story? And I will go first. I was burned by bacon as a child, so I can feel bacon popping on my skin right now. It's an unpleasant experience for me. Maybe somebody has a pleasant experience. Can you raise your hand real high and shout it out for me? I'll repeat it. Yeah. Bacon sandwiches every Christmas morning. So, do you even smell like evergreen? Yeah, so she's tying something that's not even related to what we're talking about. But she can maybe smell the evergreen. She can close her eyes and see signs of Christmas because she made bacon on Christmas mornings. They made bacon sandwiches. Anybody else have a good bacon story? We raise pigs at the farm. That's my bacon story. Seen them on both ends. Yeah. Her adopted son, you can have a birthday party with anything you want. He says, bacon. Bacon decorations. Oh my gosh. If he hasn't seen it yet, I don't know exactly how appropriate this is because this is from my teenage children, but they were obsessed with a video called Rub Some Bacon on It. If you've not seen that, it's like you hit your head, rub some bacon on it. It's really comical. He might enjoy that. A little something to take home to him. All right, Mike, let's bring us back to the slides. Okay, so the point of this is those 11 trillion synapses, they're connected. And so you don't even have to experience the full sensation for your brain to fill in the missing pieces. In Dr. Perry's book, What Happened to You, he discovered that one of the clients he was working with had an aversion to his new teacher, and he couldn't figure out why. Spoiler alert, the teacher had the same cologne as the kid's abusive father. So when he smelled Old Spice, the child went back into fight, flight, freeze, danger, protection mode, right? So how many of the kids in your care where we don't know their past history, they see bacon, and like myself, bacon is something a lot of kids are burned with. Grease from a stove, that's a common narrative in the children I work with, right? Sometimes severe, sometimes not. But if you were burned by bacon, you probably don't have warm, fuzzy Christmas feelings about it. So when I bring you into my home and I try and make those warm, fuzzy Christmas feelings, and you can only feel the skin burning, that's a mismatch of the sensory interpretation, right? And so how we interpret sensation is directly based on what happened to us and what sensations we had in the past. So yeah, you get the sight, the smell, all of these things, because what fires together wires together. So when you have a child that comes into your home, and so let's frame it this way. I have a child that comes into my home from severe neglect. This is a common narrative in our practice. Severe neglect, but because mom is caregiver is on substances that leave her incapacitated. Okay, but when mom is awake, it is chaotic. When aunties come over and they scream and they yell, "What are you doing to these children?" When the house becomes chaotic, my needs start to get met. Food might be thrown at me, but it is given to me. And in those moments of chaos, I pair that sensation with satiated needs, and so chaos is comfortable for me. So when we bring these kids into our home and we're like, "I'm going to give you the sweetest bed, and these are your fluffy stuffies. I bought them from Pottery Barn, and this is going to be amazing," and the kid rips the sheets off and sleeps on the floor, and you're like, "What the heck?" We have to remember that is safe to them to go back to what they knew. People don't leave abusive situations because they can't predict what would happen. And we become safe in what we know, right? So these kids that don't change their behaviors because now they're in this safe, loving home, it's because they didn't feel safe when things were calm. So we have to do doses and small little opportunities to build that safety, and we have to start tying it to other things, right? We have to unbreak those daisy chains, and we have to create new neural synapses. And one of the examples that I give in my book that I talk about, I'm gonna hold on to neural pathways for a little bit later. So anyway, did we sense the bacon the same? No, we did not. So what other things are we gonna sense differently? Ideas, meal times, physical touch. How many of you love physical touch? How many of you have kids in your home that hate physical touch? And that's hard, because when someone's hurting, your nervous system says, "Hugs feel good, I wanna hug you." And the child says, "When I was hugged, I was held down and bad things happened. So all my little neurons held hands with bad things happen when people touch me. And you want to touch me because you love me, and I cannot reconcile that." So we'll talk about how can we unpack that and reconcile. That's coming. What influences our sensory preferences? Your genetics influence your sensory preferences, right? The sun is difficult for my blue-eyed, I used to be very blonde-haired child. They called me the albino monkey as a child. That was my nickname. I was very blonde, very white, and I climbed a lot of things. So the sun is difficult for me. I live with a lot of friends with Hispanic heritage. They love the sun. We have very differing experience. I can't go out without sunglasses. The sun literally burns my eyes because of my genetics. How many of you do not wear sunglasses? That is so foreign to me. I will never understand that. I go out and it's like, my eyes are ablaze. The environment that you grow up in, your culture, your past experiences that we talked about. We'll talk about window of tolerance. We'll talk about state-dependent functioning, your community. And here's the big one I want you to know. Your predictability, your control, and your expectation absolutely influence your sensory preferences. And I'm going to say this multiple times today, but one of the things I get a lot in my practice is this kid is so controlling. This kid is so manipulative, right? And I would love to change the way we see that behavior to change that behavior, because how many of you do better when you know the outcome of something? Hello, we all do. It is a nervous system response. Your brainstem, which controls your arousal, and I don't mean that in a weird way, your arousal meaning how much your heart rate beats and what your eyes focus on and your blood pressure and all of that, that's your arousal, like how much you have capacity for energy, capacity, if you will. All of that is based on what you can predict happening. So if you've ever had a really hard thing, let's say you're gonna get some hard news, right? Is it easier? My kid is in college. This is a good example for me right now. She is on the struggle bus with chemistry. And we don't know what that grade's gonna be. She took the test, but she's got all this anxiety waiting on that test to come out, right? When that grade comes out. Do you think it's worse for my daughter not knowing the results, or when we get the results and she can deal with it? Not knowing. So when that kid looks at you and he says, I need the red cup, and you're like, have the green cup, they're the exact same. And you say it's a control issue, and the kid says, I drank out of a green cup before I could even remember, but I have neural synapses that tell me green cups are scary, and I can't articulate that to you because it's all subconscious, but I know the red cup is safe, and you're denying me the red cup. Do you see how we can change how we see that behavior? And just give them the red cup, if possible. Or prepare them and tell them the red cup is dirty. We can either wait for the red cup to be clean, or I have a green cup. How can we make this green cup feel safe to you? How can we give them control so that they will decrease that arousal response? Because that is human nature. If we can control, it's not even control, it's predict. Predictability calms the brainstem. That's why when we talk about what activities calm trauma, it's rhythm, repetition. Rhythm and repetition. You ever play bass music, or have you ever noticed how all these trauma responses are auditory responses that are real rhythmic bass music, right? All these vagal nerve stimulants, they're all rhythmic, repetitive things. And I challenge you to come up with a calming strategy that's not rhythmic, repetitive, and relational, right? Even smoking, even fighting, rhythmic, repetitive, relational, it involves another person, right? So much of what we do, we're looking for predictability and rhythm. So where did you grow up? How is that going to influence your sensory preferences? If you grew up in Texas, like me, well, I didn't, I grew up in Indiana, but if you grow up in Texas, the snow, we literally have thin blood. We come up here and go skiing, and we're freezing. And y'all are out there in your shorts. But you come to Texas in July, I got you. You're gonna feel like you're dying. It's so hot, it's like 110. And we're in sweatshirts, like, yeah, this is fine, right? Did you grow up with lots of people? Crowds like this? I didn't grow up with crowds like this. I don't like big crowds like this because I grew up in a different environment, right? And if you've read my book, did you grow up on the beach with the water, or did you grow up in the mountains? Did you, where did you grow up? Because where you grew up is going to be home to you. Has anybody moved away and gone back to visit? Yeah? How did it feel the first couple times you go back to visit? Does your nervous system relax? Do you take a deeper breath? Even though you may love where you are now, those early life experiences imprinted upon you to create a calm in that environment. So guess what? The smell of marijuana is calming for some of our kids. The smell of feces is calming for some of our kids because their early experiences were bathed in that sensory sensation. So can we change the way we view the behavior to understand it so that we can have strategies to alter things? This is the smoking monkey. If you've read my book, it's one of my favorite stories. one of my girlfriends that used to visit my house a lot, she was like, that's my favorite story in your whole book. I grew up with monkeys. My dad was a little eccentric, and he tried to have a tiger, and the HOA shut him down because they said that was dangerous. Fair. We had piranhas. Most people had goldfish. We had piranhas. And he had monkeys. We went through 8 monkeys as a child. And they were not always in their cages. And monkeys are not well behaved. They are not like golden retrievers. They have very opinionated personalities. And they would pee on you in an instant. And that was the way they expressed their discomfort with us, was they would pee on us. And in the 80s, everybody smoked. So this is nothing negative about my parents, right? But my parents smoked. And so my house, when I grew up, smelled, in my book, I call it monkey piss and cigarettes. And as a 50-year-old woman, I can think about that and go, disgusting. That's so gross, right? But as a 7, 8-year-old child, that smelled like home to me. And I will never forget, my parents were divorced, and I was at my dad's for the weekend, and I had a sweatshirt that had probably monkey pee on it, and it probably smelled like cigarettes. Actually, I know it did. And I went to school, and I'm feeling cozy in this sweatshirt because it smells like my dad. It smells like my house, right? And my dad's house was fun. We raced motorcycles. We were feral. He was like, if you have a buddy and a helmet, I don't care what you do. We would climb the roof and jump from the roof to the trampoline into the pool. Like, there were a lot of kids. We all joked, he's got extras, right? Like, we don't have to be safe, whatever. Amazing parents. There's nothing against them. But I was basking in the glow of the fun weekend that I had because all my neurosynapses connected for like fun, happy things when you smell monkey pee and cigarettes. And the popular girl, because I was not popular, surprise, surprise, the popular girl next to me was like, you stink. And I remember taking this big whiff and going, no, I just smell like my dad. And that's maybe why I wasn't popular, I don't know. But my point in the book is your kids that you're working with, the kids in your homes, have these same stories, and you're that popular girl going, I don't understand, because your viewpoint is normative. You are in the right with your viewpoint. But that child's experience, my experience, is just as valid and true as yours. Does this make sense to everybody? You putting some light bulbs on in your head, I'm hoping, something. Are you making neurosynapses? Are your little neurons connecting of like, oh, that's why this and this and this, right? That's what we're hoping to do today, is connect those neurosynapses for you. What was your culture? Who was in your community? Guess what? Birthday parties are hard for kids who are in care. Anybody, I don't want to be the only one teaching today. I would love some audience interaction. Give me some birthday stories. Why are they hard? You guys have as much knowledge as I do out here. Yeah. Removal happens around a birthday. So now we've wired and fired together timing. Who's got trauma-versaries that you experience every year? If you've never heard that word, it's going to make a lot of sense to you when you Google it. The trauma-versaries, because if you've got a spring birthday, then you have all these cues from the environment of that trigger of something that happened to you during that time, and you're going to snapshot. That's what the brain does. When something traumatic happens, the brain says, whoa, gather all those 11 trillion bits of data and sort through the ones that cause this danger. I don't ever want to experience that again. So very recent example, my daughter is working on her dive master certification. She was working in a rescue diving class. She was the TA for that class. And one of the people at the pool drowned. It was not her group, but she was at the top. So she was the first person to see them surface. She was the first person on scene. So the man, we assume, this only happened 2 weeks ago, we don't know. We assume he had a heart attack underwater and died there. But she does not know this. He surfaces, he is purple, his tongue is swollen and very cold. And she is doing rescue breaths on this man as the instructor is towing him to the shore, right? My daughter cannot eat ice cream right now. She's got a brand new little boyfriend. I was like, buddy, don't kiss her for a while. That's not going to be not going to be, and only pecks when you do. Because my daughter experienced a trauma that was not even anything related to her. She was the rescuer in this situation. But doing mouth to mouth with this person who did not survive has imprinted on her brain, let's not do that again. So don't put cold things in your mouth. Gummy worms are out. Like, kissing is out. And she's keeping herself safe. So what's going to happen if I don't intervene as a trauma therapist with her? This could last her lifetime. Her brain could really double down on these things. So the first thing I did was I was like, you best be chewing some gum. You need to exchange that experience for something pleasant. And you need to chew gum with your friends. And you need to have ice cream. Not right now. We're going to let your brain calm down a little bit because it is inflamed. But in 2 weeks, we're going to have some ice cream together. And we're going to eat it out of the same bowl. And we're going to mirror that experience together because I have to untie the trauma that she just experienced so that she can live and do her activities. Make sense? Yeah, so back to the birthdays. What other challenging birthday things? Yeah. Yeah, they don't want the eyes on them because they don't want to be sung to and they don't want that attention. So here's something interesting. If you've never been seen in your life and you develop a normal pathway, you develop a history of my life pathway of not being seen, when someone sees you very big like that, that's horrifying because you have no pathway to put that in. You have no connections to make that safe. You don't have the experience. And that's something that I really want to drive home that I see in my practice all the time is people come in and they have the expectations of these kids when the kid has never learned anything different. You can't do what you don't know how to do. That's going to be a quote later on in this thing, in this presentation. Somebody else had a hand up. Yeah. Some have no birthdays. Yeah, no celebrations. So again, it's really complicated. Or they had toys that were broken by others at the party. Or they had, just think about what were birthdays like for this kid before. And then that might give you some insight into how things are moving forward. Who nurtured you? What was their nurturing style? And what was their capacity and how did their history influence them? So if you've read my book, I try not to make this about me and about my childhood and traumas and things like that, but my mother had a very traumatic childhood. And my conception was during a time when my parents' marriage was falling apart. So when I was born, my mother had no capacity for me, and she will admit this. But that doesn't mean my mother is a bad mother. It just means I didn't get what I needed as a child. Right? And so we have to look at what was the capacity of the caregiver to be able to model and know how to do. We can't do what we don't know how to do. So sometimes we have to mentor and come along beside people. Sensory perception is a feedback loop. It is not linear. So sensory perception doesn't mean that I am going to make a decision to have a sensation and that's the only way that it goes. Our sensations are always being guided and monitored. So this is an example of when you pick up a cat, and in my second book, I talk about these connections being airliners. And so like every neural connection is a pathway that a plane would take. What is that called? That's like a trajectory. A what? A runway would be where it lands, but the actual flight route, the flight path. So I talk about how the planes are all on these flight paths, and you have parts of your brain that are bigger hubs where a lot of planes land and then they take off again. So like the amygdala has a lot to do with memory and timestamps and like if we remember the trauma or not and how we categorize it. So a lot of planes will land in the amygdala and then take back off. But the little part of our cortex that controls my pinky, that's only going to take your regional airliners. It might even be little Cessnas coming into there, right? Not a lot of planes are landing when I bend my pinky. But if my pinky is going through a bucket of rice or my pinky is cleaning a poopy diaper, then a lot of plans are landing because I'm in the pressure zone, I'm in the smell zone, I'm in the vision zone. Like all of these planes are connecting with that one experience. And we adjust. If that cat were to suddenly become activated and start hissing at me, I'm going to adjust my muscles in my arms. I'm going to adjust my pupils and my gaze with that cat. Like all of these things are happening instantly. So when you have a kid that has a sensory response and you're like, wow, that was big. Yeah, because things are happening so fast they can't even think about it before it happens, right? And there's different pathways that sensations will come into the brain. There's the dorsal thalamic path and the medial limbic path, and you don't need to know those words, but you have to know that one is a fast track and one's a slow track. So have you ever stepped on a Lego or something sharp? Did you step on that Lego and go, oh, that's a Lego, I should move my foot? No, you lost your balance. You reacted so fast that your body had to do some righting reflexes to get you back into check because you want to go back into homeostasis, right? Your body reacted in a big way, but then it said, oh, wait, go back to homeostasis, go back to what you know. So then this side of your body engaged and you used some reflexes to right yourself back so that you didn't fall down the stairs or fall down or whatever. Your body is constantly making these adjustments for you. However, if you've ever stepped on something squishy, then sometimes you're like, you look down, right? Something sharp and you react. But something squishy, you look down because it goes into a different part of your brain. So that's a lot of the treatment that I'm going to talk about later on is what activities go into the thoughtful part of the brain and come up that thoughtful tract versus things that are going to go into the reactive tract, right? So light touch, if you've got a kid in your home and you light touch them, neurologically, we are programmed to be like, what the heck? Don't light touch me. Unless I know it's coming, because that predictability tells the brainstem, hey, something unpleasant is coming our way. But we actually like this based on our past experiences because we've grown. So when this light touch comes, we're going to enjoy it. Don't freak out. But if that light touch is not predicted, it's not known, you will always have a very startled response. Versus vibration, deep touch, and sheerness, like this, the moving of your skin back and forth like a massage. Those sensations are coded to calm your nervous system. So that's why vibration feels so good. That's why running feels good until your heart catches up and says, we can't breathe, right? Or your knee catches up and says, I'm too old for this. But those types of activities go through different pathways, and we're still always adjusting and monitoring. So the other thing I want to talk about is how wide is your window? Your sensory preferences are going to depend on your window of tolerance. How many of you have had the negative thought in your mind of, why is this so hard for me right now? Anybody felt like that? I don't know about you, but my personal life and my professional life right now are a little chaotic. There are things that are happening that, guess what, are out of my control. I can't control them, so my brain goes, I can't predict what's going to happen. So my nervous system, on Dr. Perry's arousal continuum, he would say that my nervous system is bumped up a level, right? I am no longer in the calm, I am in the alert, and I'm headed towards fear. And what happens is the closer I get to fear and terror, the shorter my window of tolerance gets. And if you've not heard the term window of tolerance, it's essentially a way of describing what is your capacity in this moment. If the fire alarm were to go off in the next 30 seconds, all of our windows of tolerance would shrink. You would no longer care what I am talking about. You would no longer care what is in your bags. You'd no longer care how your socks feel in this moment. You would be in that emergent situation. And you should be, because that's what the brain is designed to keep us safe, right? That's what we're supposed to do. But when your window gets small, everything bothers you. So I can almost promise you, somebody give me an example. Doesn't have to be personal. I want to keep it as anonymous as possible. But give me an example of something a kid will do that just sets off all of your alarms. You know, they come in, they won't eat something. Or, you know, like what does a kid do that's like, oh, that's so irritating? Yeah. Incessant noises. Non-stop noises. Yes. Okay, so we've got non-stop noises. If you, what is something, if I might interact with you, can I have a dialogue? Okay, what's something that fills your bucket? What calms your nervous system and makes you feel safe, that is predictable for you and you really enjoy? Like if I was like, girl, I'm gonna give you something you're gonna love, what would it be? Chocolate, coffee, dancing, a quiet room where there's no stimulation. Yeah. The auditory bass. Give her some AC/DC. Love it. Yes, with some bass, okay? So I'm just going to use you as an example. If she is at a grocery store and she doesn't have access to her noise-canceling headphones with the bass, and this child is her window is closing fast, right? But if I could provide her with those headphones and maybe take her outside in nature and do things that would open up her window of tolerance, are the noises going to bother you as much? No. And what we need to understand is it's not just in that moment that's going to close our window of tolerance. If she was my daughter worried about her chemistry test, or more likely calculus, her window is closed because her mind is preoccupied with something she's worried about. If I've got a court case coming up, if I have a family visit coming up, if I have a sibling that's having some dysregulation, my window is going to close because I will not have the capacity in that moment. So what we're going to talk later is about how do we find those noise-canceling headphones? How do we find ways to adapt an activity to get outside so it's not as bombarding for that? But we have to understand first why, because otherwise we have shame on ourselves. And we wonder, why am I having such a hard time with this? You know, Susie probably did not do as great on her calculus exam because she literally put her mouth on a dead person. And I could look at that and be like, you know calculus, what's wrong with you? But if I understand what happened to her, I can have that compassion. And I can say, it's okay, no one dies from a C in calculus. You might not be a dentist. We may have to alter your career plans, but no one's gonna die from getting a C in calculus. Now, I know some of you out there are like, but they will die if they're coming at me with a knife, right? Like these are behaviors that you guys see, is you have these really, really big behaviors. And so what I'm hopeful of is we'll find ways to de-escalate so that they don't get to that big, and having safety plans and things like that. So how do we open the window so that the knife is never picked up? And who is opening and closing your window? Do you have someone in your life that will help you to have that window nice and big? Because that's how we open the window, is with a friend. So find your friends, join the club if you don't have a friend, if you don't have someone you can confide in, but that's really important. And you don't need 100 people on Facebook to validate you. That's not what I mean. Dr. Perry says you need 4 people that are in your corner, and that's not a lot, but for some of us, it's hard to have those 4 people. So we meet them at these conferences, and we meet them in these places. And we see people that say, yeah, that's really hard, I can't fix it, but I see you, and I can hold your hand through it and co-regulate with you. All right, I'm gonna go through these, and then we're gonna take a quick break here in just a few minutes, because I know everybody's getting a little antsy. What is the role of control and predictability? So again, I talked about when you can predict something, it calms the brainstem. So this is a slide that kind of gives you an illustration of what happens. If I were to do an fMRI, and what that is, if you're not familiar, it's a way to put your brain in a scan, and then we measure where the oxygen is in your brain. So those little neurosynapses, those connections, they use oxygen to move around. So what we're basically doing is we're taking a screenshot of like, where is the air in your brain? Where is that focus? Where's the energy happening when we have certain thoughts or movements? And we can see those neural connections light up. You've all seen the images now. So what we're looking at here is like fireworks. Those little fireworks are these connections. So if I come upon a snake, because I'm in Texas, and I see a snake I'm not expecting on a path, all of my fireworks are going to light up in the back of my brain, which is the protective area. I am not thinking what kind of snake. It might even be a stick. It may not be an actual snake at all. But if I'm not expecting it, I'm going to have fireworks in the back of my brain. But if I know it's coming, we have a snake. We have a ball python at the farm. And when Xerxes comes out, I hate snakes. I'm not a fan of Xerxes, but he's a nice snake, they tell me. I don't love him. And I do have a little fireworks in my brainstem when Xerxes comes out. But then my frontal cortex goes, it's Xerxes. I'm not a mouse. He's not going to bite me. I don't look like a mouse. If you look like a mouse, then you have a problem. But he only eats mice, so he's good. And then I actually have activity in the different parts of my brain. My motor cortex will light up. My language centers will light up. And my thinking centers will light up. So it really depends on, are you expecting this sensation or not? And your brain literally functions differently based on prediction. So what happens when they don't line up? How many of you are a little irritated that that slide is crooked? I mean, own it. It's meant to be irritating. And the reason is, it's to show you that the smallest unexpected things that aren't right really set us off. And so our kids that don't get the green cup or the red cup, it's this to them. And sometimes their systems don't have a wide enough window to come back. So when we don't match that current social norm or expectation, we go through life with crooked slides. And that window closing just a little bit, our arousal level elevating, our stress response elevating just a little bit all the time. So I think, is my watch wrong? Is it 11? It's 10. Okay, then I'm going to go for another 30 minutes. My watch is wrong because I am on Austin time. I was looking at that and I thought, oh my goodness. I mean, I'm telling stories, but I think I was telling that many stories. Okay, we're going to go for another 30 minutes. All right, so how do we influence that neural capacity and our attention? We do it through felt safety, appropriate expectations, and safe relationships. We can ask for clarification. What do you mean by this? One of my stories that I tell is I was called into a preschool, and it was a very conservative Christian preschool, and there was a little boy who was in the foster system, and his parents were like, hey, he's had a rough past, I'm gonna put him in this sweet, nurturing environment and try and give him some new experiences. Well, the problem was he was trafficked very young, and so on the playground, he was showing himself. Because in his past, what happened to him was that in order to get favor, to get food, to get attention and love, he performed acts for people. So when he gets into this new setting, he's going to bring his past with him, and he's going to see these little girls on the playground and go, I would like to make a friend. I know how to make a friend. This is a very effective way to make friends. And so he acts out what he knows, and those moms lost their ever-loving mind, as is reasonable. That is reasonable. If a little boy in the class is showing his privates, then that's a big deal, right? But the way they responded was to ostracize him and ban him from things and tell their children to never talk to him and to stay away from him. So now we've added shame to this poor child. We don't have appropriate expectations for him. So I went in and I said, y'all need to stop this unless you want him to go the school to prison pipeline, because that's where you're sending him right now. He has no idea what he is doing. He is not being malicious. He is not being intentful on this. And by you ostracizing him, he's going to get desperate and turn to new means to try and get this attention. What other things do you think he saw to get the needs met? Where is this going to escalate? What if we embrace him and we teach him how to be a good friend. So I told the teacher, I said, what I want from now on, 1, don't leave him unsupervised. We did learn that lesson. 2, let him be the leader. Whenever you're going somewhere, he gets to hold the door for everybody else. Keeps his hands busy, keeps his hands off of the other kids, but it gives him a position of leadership. When they go out, he's the one that gets to hold the basket that has all the balls and bubbles and balloons and kickballs and cones and all that. So every child has to come and make eye contact with him. And again, it puts him in this position of authority where kids are interacting with him, but it gives them a natural way to do so. And then the teacher was really good about giving him things to do in the classroom. You know, he's the one that gets to pass out the snack, so he's feeding everyone. That's intentional. Snack time, let them be the passer-outer of the snacks. Because when you get fed by someone, you feel loved. What do we do when someone has a death or a crisis? What do we do? Somebody answer for me. We make food. We create a meal train. So giving someone food is showing them care, right? We let him be the leader, and we give appropriate expectations for what he does know. He can't do things he doesn't know. And if we shame him for doing things he doesn't know, then we're just further creating more problems. So, a quick discussion of attachment and trauma. Again, Dr. Purvis said this, we cannot lead a person to a place of healing that we haven't experienced. So today, I am talking about kids because this is a foster event, you know, Utah foster care. But I want you to think of yourself. And I'm going to give you a spoiler alert. The biggest change you will have today is changing your own nervous system. If you can open your window of tolerance and experience this healing for yourself, then you'll be able to lead the children in your care to the same spot. But until you can find your own open window, you can't open the window for somebody else. So hopefully, and if I don't give you good strategies by the end of the morning, come see me at lunch and we'll have a personal session and I will figure this out for you. And kids can't behave in a way they haven't witnessed, right? So we've got to model. Open our own windows before we open theirs. And so this is one of my favorite photos. It's in my new book, and it talks about co-regulation through connected relationships. And I can just hear Dr. Purvis going, that's the essence of trauma-informed care, right? So this is actually my treatment room. We have a llama. His name is Jacopo, and he is as big a jerk as you would expect a llama would be. We say he's French because, you know, I don't know. If you're French, I apologize, but he's a French llama, and he does not like you, and he wants you to leave his sheep alone. And so he talks with an accent and everything. But he's a very stinky llama. He's stinky, and he'll spit on you. And I don't even know if I'm doing a French accent. It's not one of my favorite things about this book, somebody came up to me at a course, and it cracked me up because I was talking about a funny thing that you can do to diffuse an escalated situation is to talk in a funny voice. Like if you've got a child that's really acting up and you're like, what's the matter with you? You know, like, what is wrong with these French fries? Are they not the right temperature? You know, like you could not, what's the matter with you is probably not the best thing to say to somebody, but to say something in a funny accent. And then because it's different. And your brain goes, hey, novel, unexpected, I'm going to put 40 of my neurons on that, right? And I'm going to ignore some of these other things that are in the background that I'm currently upset about because I provided new and novel, and the brain went, zoop, hey, I'm going to pay attention to that. So in my book, I got to the point where it said talk in a funny accent, and I remember being in my closet and thinking, oh, I should say that with an accent. And then I thought, but what would be culturally like appropriate as a gringo white girl to do, right? And I'm not good at accents. And so I don't even know, I just said something probably similar to what I just said. And somebody came up to me at a course and they're like, I just love that part. I don't know, what accent were you going for? And I was like, exactly, that was the one. I was going for none. Just a silly voice. So anyway, but Jacopo, he talks it like this somehow. And so that is supposed to be the idea that Jacopo is stinky. And if he comes up to my window on the farm and we're in the therapy room and he's outside in my window looking in, the child that I'm working with is going to be like, oh my gosh, he stinks. Now, there's two ways to interact with that. I can be like, yeah, and let the child sit with their discomfort. And then the child is going to be like, no, he stinks, Miss Maudie. Like, he stinks bad. Like, they're going to escalate until I say, oh, I smell it too, right? This is the kid that's like, my socks don't fit. And if we look at them and go, your socks are fine. No, my socks don't fit. I'm now going to throw them at you because you are not here. You're not hearing the words coming out of my mouth. That's a movie. Like, do you hear the words coming out of my mouth? What is that from? Rush Hour. Yes, thank you. Do you hear the words? That's your kids. Your kids are essentially saying, do you hear the words coming out of my mouth? Because if you can't hear my words, I will show you with actions, right? And here's the thing. We talk about matching the energy, but not the dysfunction. And Robin and Goebel and I have a whole podcast on this because it's something I believe in big. I cannot interact with a child and not match their energy. If a child comes up to me and says, I cut my finger, and I look at them and I say, wow, you need a Band-Aid. Let's go get you a Band-Aid. The child is going to be like, are you hearing the words coming out of my mouth? No, I cut myself, right? So I didn't match the energy when I remained calm, because we want to tell all you people in this audience to always be calm. That is crap. You are not calm, and you are discombobulating to the child when you're acting calm, when they're like, you are not calm, I can tell. And guess what? Guess what I'm really good at is reading people's emotions, because my past taught me to do that really, really well. And if I don't trust you to match what you're going to do, I'm going to have some trust issues with this, right? So if I don't match the energy, if I come in and go, yeah, you need a Band-Aid, I'm still providing care, but the child doesn't feel seen. If I go the other way and I match the energy, but I make it dysfunctional, and I say, well, go get a Band-Aid, you moron. How did you do that? What happened to you? I'm no better. I've matched the energy, but I'm not being compassionate. Instead, the child needs, oh my gosh, that's like a really big cut. What happened? Let's go get you a Band-Aid, right? How would you feel if someone came up to you and was like, dude, I just won the lottery? Would you believe them? No. So when you tell the child, I'm fine, I'm not mad, they're going to be like, that is crap, because this is a scene that it should exhibit some emotion. No, when people win the lottery, they're excited. And when they're sad, they're sad. And so you match that energy. And the matching the energy, if you want the key to that, is all about cadence. Do you know what cadence is? It's the rhythm, right? I cut myself. That's a very big cut. I hate you. That's a big word. You're blah, 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 blah. You seem offended. Are you offended? Like, don't tell them what they are, but be curious about it, right? I hate you. Let's find something new. Try and make it kind of match that energy, and don't just ignore it, because then they will escalate for that. So that's what I'm doing here in this photo, is Jacopo comes up, and I'm going to match the energy with the kid. The kid is like, oh, he's so stinky. And I'm like, ooh, is he ever. He's a stinky llama. What can we do together so that we both feel better about his stinkiness? Can we light a candle? What if we light a candle? You think a candle is going to smell better than Jacopo? No, you hate candles too? Perfect. Okay, let's wave our hands in front of our noses. Let's find a different strategy. Spoiler alert, in my book I talk about this, but candles, actually the synthetic scented candles have an extra molecule built into them to attach to your nasal receptors, so that you smell it longer than the candle is actually burning. That's why you can walk into those candle stores, and then when you walk out, you still have the headache. It's that extra molecule, right? But Natural scents that don't have that synthetic molecule don't behave the same way. When those scents are gone, then the scents are gone. But smell is very strong. How many of you smelled the bacon? Smell is embedded in our memory centers and our emotion centers. So co-regulation through connected relationship is the essence. Whatever it is that is upsetting and causing this big meltdown, we've got to match that energy. If they kick off their shoes, you don't just calmly go over and pick them up and hand them back to them. You go be like, whoa, these shoes flew across the room. What about these shoes do you not want to wear? That's very different than we have to put our shoes on to get out the door. So you can either have your big excitement then, or you can prolong it for 20 minutes and then be like, then freaking don't wear your shoes at all. You're eventually going to match them. But do you want to do it from a place of your own open window, or do you want to do it from a place of your closed window? I like to keep my window open. All right, so with that, any questions over, this is kind of the neurology. Like I kind of gave you the why we perceive things the way that we do. The second half of this morning is going to be talking about the senses and how do we influence them and provide predictability and control for them to better the experience of other people and ourselves. What questions do you have? Yeah.
What you're just describing sounds like it would require a personality change.
Okay, perfect. Yes. Yeah, how do I honor who I am as a person and recognize that you're not going to maybe stand up here wearing daisies and things like that, like understanding we are different. One thing I would say is try and have one of your 4 people be that person that can get excited. And try and have a community where that child is going to be met. I am way too much for some kids. You know, the real dissociative ones, I do really well with them, but I have to work really hard at it because I am not a sit and be quiet person. But I know that about myself, and so I'm working towards being better at that. But I also know that about myself, and so I recruit my caregiver or my coworker, Katie. Katie is way calmer than I am. And I'm like, Katie, this is a Katie response. Like, will you help me with this? So 1, expand your network. And 2, I'm not wanting you to be, and you can match the energy because it's the cadence, right? So a great example, a colleague of mine that was in Australia who is on the calmer side, she was working in a residential unit and they had a guy who was throwing glass and chairs and breaking things, and he would break a picture and then come at you with a shard of glass, right? So real high energy type of stuff. And my friend is a kind of low energy kind of person. So what she found was helpful, again, she was just listening to the words of find that cadence. And instead of being like, whoa, that's a lot of glass, you know, like I might be in there and you might see me being pretty animated, right? Because I'm going to be kind of matching his energy in a very physical way. She instead picked up his energy. I'll make sure I don't fall off the stage here. But she picked up the energy and she just swayed like this. So that his mirror neurons, which is how we assess the person in front of us, are they similar to us? Can I see their experience through my mirror neurons? His mirror neurons picked up that she was on the same cadence. I have had parents where when a child is really escalated, instead of just standing there very calmly, they pick up his movement. What is his rhythm? What is his cadence? And they might just tap their hip. They might just tap the table. And it's a subconscious way of saying, I see you, right? And what's interesting is the person in the power differential will be the weight of that interaction. So for example, I am in the power differential. I'm up here with you guys. If I were to stand here and do a lot of this, y'all would follow me and you would start to calm down. But if I get up here and I'm playing, you know, AC/DC or Lady Gaga or, you know, whatever, you're going to pick up that energy and you're going to come towards me. And so sometimes our kids are the power differential because they're the ones that are being the most dysregulated, right? And so everybody in there, and we've experienced this, like everybody in the room kind of matches that energy. And so we need to come in somehow and match it with them so that we can then anchor them and co-regulate like that picture with Jacopo to bring them back down. So I'm not saying you have to be talking in a silly voice, although you could try. And it may be hard, but that's where you can choose your hard sometimes. But again, I don't want you to be who you're not, but I want to open your mind to maybe try some things that are different. Talking in an accent, it feels really vulnerable and weird, but if you do it twice and you get a great response, your little neurons will be like, that wasn't so bad. And if you do it with a friend, if you have a buddy, then it makes it a lot less activating for you. And that's why those 4 people are important to you as well. Does that help? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Fine. Yeah, okay. So I think it would be easier if we had like a role play, if someone is willing to role play with me. Because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to say, use your eyes, use your senses to find a beat. Like if I was going to play music, if I was going to write a score for the scene that I'm witnessing, what would that music sound like? And then can my body follow that beat? So if somebody can give me a scenario, I can maybe show this. Yeah, okay, so give me a scenario. Okay, so a little boy who gets easily dysregulated or agitated over small things. Okay, hood up, looking down, he's shutting down. Okay. Okay. Yep. Okay, so she says you can tell it's coming because he'll make a noise, he'll have a breath, and there's a shift in his breathing. Okay. Yeah, but then he's shutting down. Okay. Possibly. I'm gonna see if I can work with that. So what happens is then, so he takes a breath and he starts to shut down, and then he's like, never mind. And then you're trying to meet the need, but he doesn't give you any more clues as to what the need is, so you don't know how to meet it, and then he basically just dissociates and runs and disappears. He disappears. Okay. So I'm gonna briefly go into Dr. Perry's arousal continuum and talking about how the stress response will impact your heart rate, your breathing, your pupils, your digestion, your sense of time. All of these things are impacted through this arousal continuum. And Robin Goebel has created a beautiful analogy of this called the owls, watchdogs, and possums. So Google owls, watchdogs, and possums, and I'm going to try and teach this to you in 5 minutes because I'm watching my time. We got 8 minutes to go. So basically what happened, and this is also taking in the polyvagal theory and Stephen Porges's work and all of that. So in essence, your nervous system has 3 states that it can be in. And this is very simplified, very watered down, but it's a great metaphor for an example, and it's going to tie into your question. When you are in your frontal cortex, when Dr. Perry would say that you are in the alert and calm part of the arousal continuum, your window is relatively open, and your nervous system is at homeostasis. You are in your owl brain. You have access to the frontal cortex. You can think about things. You can think about the future. You can actually put pieces of the puzzle together because your owl is in your brain. It's kind of like Inside Out, if you've seen the movie Inside Out and the different controls, and anger gets the controls, and then sadness and all that. So you've got these owls, watchdogs, and possums in your brain. Now, Dr. Perry would say, if you feel like you have autonomy, if you feel like you have control of this situation, if there's something you yourself can do, you will go down the sympathetic pathway, which is the arousal pathway in Dr. Perry's example. It is the sympathetic pathway in the polyvagal theory, and Robin calls that the watchdog. If you feel like attacking someone will get your need met and decrease your fear, then you will become a watchdog. And just like Dr. Perry's continuum, you will start out as a what's up watchdog. And then you will become a, the alert watchdog. And then the back off watchdog where he's kind of growling. And then he'll be the attack watchdog. So you don't immediately attack someone. You're like, what was that? I'm curious about this. And then whatever. If you don't feel like you can handle this, Dr. Perry would say you go through the dissociative continuum. And women and children tend to go the dissociative continuum because they've learned from past experience they cannot control the situation. It is best to disappear, hide, and shut down. And so again, you will go through a continuum. The polyvagal theory calls that the dorsal vagal response, and ventral vagal is your owl. And so you go from a la-la land possum, where you're just kind of daydreaming a little bit, and then you become a trickster possum, and this is what Dr. Perry calls the robotic compliance. I'm just going to do whatever the frick you want, so you will get off my tail. That a lot of us right now are in robotic compliance with what is happening in the world. I'm just going to do my job, but you're not really thinking about your job. Your owl is not very engaged. And then you become the sleeping possum and then the passed out possum. Okay, so anytime you see someone that's pulling, if you're looking, and then I love this analogy, and the possum and the goal of trauma treatment is that the owl stays in your brain. And Robin talks about when the owl can be there, when the possum and owl play together, that's reading a book together. That's snuggling on the couch together. And you can imagine that owl and the possum just kind of sitting there reading that book with you. It's so lovely and cozy. And when you're playing together and you're joking and doing that, then your watchdog and your owl are playing together in your brain. But then once things get scarier and your stress response increases, the owl flies away and you're left with an unthinking watchdog or possum. So your child is going possum. He's disconnecting, he's moving away, right? So that tells me in my treatment approach, this child feels like they have no control. So I am going to symptomologically go after giving them more control. Because if you feel like you don't have control so much that you're shutting down, I'm going to work to bring the owl back by giving them a little bit more control. When the owl is around, I'm going to keep them around by giving them a little more control, like giving them autonomy of things, right? The other thing that I'm going to say is, you said his breath changes. Your breath and your heartbeat are the actual rhythms you're trying to find. So if his breath, he goes, mirror that. Whew, is something getting hard? And so you're going to bring that energy down, and then he's giving you a cadence. It's okay, it's okay, it's okay. That's a cadence. I could play music to it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. I can also play music to it's okay, Eeyore, right? When they are talking to you, that's their cadence. Because when your breath gets shallow, your voice gets faster. And this is one of the things that I will tell you as a trauma sensory inspector, is when a child has a really high-pitched, fast voice. I'm going to have everybody do an experiment before we go to lunch right now, okay? Take a really shallow breath, and then try and say some words. And just like we'll say the words, happy birthday to me. Everybody say, happy birthday to me. Okay, you don't have a lot of air, so you had to get it out fast, and it was a little higher, right? Now take a deep breath. Happy birthday to me. Did you see how your breath support dictated the cadence of your voice? So when the child comes in with this high-pitched voice, the other thing I want you to know is when you speak high, watch what happens to my shoulders. Those of you that carry the tension in your shoulders, right? When you pull the shoulder girdle up, you're compressing the diaphragm in, and you cannot take a deep breath when your diaphragm is being pulled up by your shoulder girdle. So one of the biggest things we can do to help kids is just relax that shoulder girdle and help them get an expansive breath. Telling a kid to breathe when they're like that is not going to be therapeutic. It's the out breath, because the out breath pushes the diaphragm down and expands the lung capacity. So that's why box breathing and things like that, it's all about bringing it in and then letting it out. So your example, I would listen for what is the rhythm of his, I can't. I don't know. That's a high energy. And so you gotta wiggle your body, sway, blink your eyes, do something that matches that high rhythm, right? Versus the dissociator that's that real low, I just can't. And I love the little engine it could. I'm singing it to my grandbaby right now. Or, I need to rest my weary wheels. I feel that deeply. And I cannot. I can't come at the I cannot kid with the like, yes, you can. We're Bob the Builder. No, I have to be like, this feels hard. This feels hard. Can I do half of it for you? Can I somehow scaffold you to help you with that? Does that help? Yay. So Google Robin Goebel. She's one of my best friends, and I just love her. And I love that she has put the arousal continuum into owls, watchdogs, and possums. And she's got so many resources that will go way deeper into these concepts than I can do in 5 minutes. We're going to go do a seminar together in a couple months, and we're spending a whole day on owls, watchdogs, and possums. So, all right, let's take a quick, 5-10 minute break, go to the bathroom. Apparently and here's what's funny. I want you to notice, ladies, when you go into that squatty potty, how does it make you feel? How's the sensation? Does it seem different to you? And that makes it code as I don't like it because it's different. What's that? I might. Let's push things back. Let's do that.
So if we brought,
And I can move this flip chart down if I need. How's that?
Speaking of squatty potty,
Ah, you're the best, and it's a fancy glass. Thank you.
and there's no, just take one
Okay.
or two.
Okay,
I
I have
to
some
return
that
it.
are up
Oh,
here.
you do?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
because I had no napkins. I was like,
Okay.
how do I deliver something
You're
that she
amazing.
has no napkins?
See? This is good. This is good. Okay.
I don't know, maybe this? Should we
And
put
don't
this
let me forget to give you back your phone.
My what? Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'll need that tomorrow. Let's just move it down. Here, hang on. want to support that. But take your 4 people to lunch. Okay, so along those lines, I am going to do two questions. And participation in my stuff is always consensual. Like, if you don't want to participate, you don't have to. I'm not going to force you to do anything. If you're willing, though, I would love to see a raise of hands if you would like to expand your personal network. Now, some of us have a friend card that's full. My friend card is full. I cannot take on new friends right now. And I'm just saying that to be honest, because my window is a little small for my friend group, because a lot of them have a lot of high need. Hopefully in 5 to 6 years, my window will open up again and I can accept new friends. It's like a dance card, right? And so I say that in hopes of vulnerability to some people out here. They're like, oh my gosh, meeting another person, I can't imagine. But there are other people in the room that have open friend cards, and you're looking for your 4 people. And I would love for this to be a networking opportunity. So if you're willing and you would like to just maybe connect with someone in this room that is somewhat like-minded, hopefully, to you, that could expand your 4-person network, would you raise your hand and then just kind of look around and maybe find these people for lunch? Just kind of look around. If you want another person to kind of help you out and just be a buddy, and then whatever comes after that is up to you guys. And then the other, I have had another request. I'm assuming this is another networking request, is to raise your hand if you're an educator in the room. Who are my educators? Raise them high, because somebody's looking to find you. Thank you. Thank you to all the educators. You guys are doing amazing work. Okay. All right. I had a question over the break that I really liked. And the question was, when kids have tics or they're stimming or they're doing these types of things, will they grow out of that? Will that change? That's the heart of the question. And my response was, a tic or a stim or something like that is completely normal. We all have them. It's just that some of us have them that are more socially normative than others. But I am hearing a lot of rappers right now. That tells me that y'all are putting those mints in your mouth. The mouth is one of the most regulatory organs that we have. It's the first place that we receive satiation. That's why food is such a comfort for a lot of people, and that's why neglect and food issues are so complex. And oral motor issues, a lot of sexual abuse. These kids have oral motor dysfunction that we have to work with as OTs. And getting over that is huge, because so much of our regulatory system is our mouth. That's why so many tics involve blah, blah. And it's not a word. The tics that they're using are very proprioceptive. So I'll turn my mic sideways. It's a, like bop, 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 bop. Pushing your lips together, clicking your tongue, biting. Those are very proprioceptive. I don't know that's a word I'll get to in a few minutes here. But it's that deep pressure. Remember, deep pressure comes into the brain through a different part of the spinal cord, right? It comes in differently. It's a calming response. So anything, this hitting, the tapping, the banging, they are rhythmic and they are proprioceptive. And when you see those things, you should be thinking to yourself, this person is trying to calm down using the resources that they have. And how many times do we as adults put a mint in our mouth, tap our foot, twirl our hair, drink something through a straw, have hot coffee, have cold coffee? And how do we limit those choices for our kids? They're not allowed to have these same strategies. So they find other ones. One of my favorite examples is I had a little guy who spit all the time. And the more he got anxious or stressed, his arousal zones went into the watchdog side, because a watchdog spits at you, a possum does not, which is good. I like the watchdogs because the watchdogs do well in life. The watchdogs don't let life run over them as much as the possums. And the watchdogs are really, really hard as children. They are very hard to live with as little people, but they grow up to be really cool world changers. And so I offer you that little bit of hope. But when you think about this kid that was spitting all the time, me telling him not to spit was very ineffective. That's not going to work. And so the strategy was I gave him a trash can and said, spit into this. Quit spitting in my face and spit into this instead. And he did. And then after a while, he no longer felt he had to spit because I was able to adapt his environment and open his window of tolerance to where his stress response decreased and he didn't feel the need to stim and spit as much, right? And the other thing I will caution you, I have masturbators as well in my caseload, and that is a stim, rhythmic, repetitive response, my friends. It's proprioceptive, it's rhythmic, it's repetitive, and it releases a lot of endorphins. So if you tell them that they can't do that, or you put a tight belt on them, or you do something else, they will pick another strategy that will be just as offensive to you. So you have to find a strategy that is agreeable between the two of you to replace it. Let them handle slime. Let them play with those little snakes, I call them, that are like these little things that you hand over hand and they kind of slide through. They're like a little balloon that comes in on itself. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. It's an 80s toy. The sensory stretchy things. So whatever it is that they're doing that you cannot tolerate, find something that matches the sensory experience and work with them to transition to that other thing. Because I've had kids where, and I think I led into this difficultly, like, they were tapping on the table and the teacher's like, you can't do that. And so then they're tapping on their penis. It's like, well, they're not tapping the table anymore. But you want to definitely find, help them find the new strategy, if that makes sense. And so that's what really, being an occupational therapist, that's what I spend a lot of my day doing, is working with the caregivers. And the first thing I say is this really a big deal? If this behavior is meeting the need of the child and it's really not that disruptive, can I just overlook it? Can I open my window of tolerance to allow it to happen? Because sometimes what happens is when I put pressure on it, then it gets worse. And if I can just decrease the pressure, we know that they're doing these behaviors because they don't feel safe. Their stress response is activated. And if I'm trying to control them or putting behavior modifications on them, I'm furthering their stress response, and this behavior is just going to escalate, right? So step one is, can I just let this happen? And I love, so Robin and I do a training for professionals, and it's a year-long intensive. And I was telling Liz last night, just yesterday, we were talking about the idea that the kid has to turn his tech off at 10 o'clock because there are multiple studies that say we should not be doing tech before bedtime. It ruins your sleep. When you're tired, you're cranky, and it snowballs. So parents that have tech restrictions, good for you. And they are good, they are sound, they are studied. This is what we all aspire to, right? But I will also ask you, how many of you are good about keeping your phones out of your rooms? Yeah, my husband and I tried that for about a year in our marriage. My husband's a big tech guy. He's like, no tech in the bedroom. I'm like, perfect. And I'm sneaking my phone in like crazy. Now he's got his phone in there too. So yeah, I love it's, what is it, Zootopia, where it's like, oh, we settled hard. Another phrase that we say in my house is better living through mutual enablement. So that's a good phrase if you want to be like, hey, better living through mutual enablement right now. And so what I want to say is, let's take that example of tech, right? And the example was, I want the child to turn their tech off at 10 because I know that it's good for them, but it's such a battle. And we're arguing until 11 o'clock. And they're already staying up anyway. And so Robin was kind of talking through from her psychology standpoint or social worker standpoint. And she was like, what would happen if you just didn't? Like, would the world end if you let them have tech a little bit later? Probably not. And it would actually make the house a little bit calmer. And I love the approach of, again, when a child is in the protective, when they are in protective, you have to go connective to try and bring them back. And so her script that she gave was something to the effect of, hey, buddy, I really believe that we should turn the tech off at 10 o'clock for lots of reasons, and we've already talked about them. You already know all the reasons why. I had a really big day today. My window is really small, and I'm not going to argue with you tonight over this. So what do you think is a reasonable time to turn your tech off? And you will be surprised how many kids will be met with, oh my gosh, I have control over this. They get control, their fear response comes down because now they can predict what's going to happen. More parts of their brain open up, the owl flies back, and they might say, how about 11? Cool, 11 is great. And if it's 11:30, you've still won because the nights you're arguing with them, they're on tech till 1 a.m. and you're exhausted. So look at these rules that you have and really look at them about what is the ultimate goal here. And the ultimate goal when we are raising trauma-responsive strategies and we're working towards trauma-responsive strategies is connection. Because if I have connection with my caregivers, my outcome in life is going to be way better. Way better. Because as humans, we flock as our first stress response. And if we have no one to flock to, then we escalate down the continuum very quickly. Does that make sense? When you get bad news, what's the first thing you want to do? Call a friend. And if you can call a friend and you can buffer, then you'll do better. And I promised I wouldn't get political, but I'm going to go a little political today. I just found out today that CASA is being defunded, and I am mad. I am so mad. CASA. CASA has been defunded. And so I woke up this morning to that news and I was lit. But I called my network. I called my inner community and I vented and I voiced that to them. And I expressed my anger and my frustration. And then I said, how do I speak to a group of 250 people who rely on CASA? How do I do that today? And my answer was by dosing. By opening your windows of tolerance with little pieces of joy and going overboard and putting on this adorable little daisy ring. This was like, just for you. Because I'm trying to dose and connect and equip and do the things that I can do, the things that I have control over. I lean into, Marty, what's going to decrease your stress response? Rhythmic repetitive activity and control. So I'm going to talk about the things I can control. And I'm going to encourage all of you to find friends to volunteer to pick up some of the slack for the things that we're going to miss. And I'm encouraging you to find your community. And I'm doing things that are proactive because of that, right? So crap is still going to happen to us, guys. We are not going to be able to control all the crap that's going to happen. But we can control how we respond to it if we can keep our owl in place. And that was the point of this whole conversation with Robin, was if you decide to let that child eat that last piece of cake before bedtime, if you decide that while you are in your owl brain, your nervous system is not as jacked up as when your watchdog screams at them, then eat the last freaking piece of cake for all I care. If we're going to get there anyway, let your owl make that decision, right? My little boy is still going to show himself on the playground. But my owl needs to be there to be like, whoa, 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 hey, let's not do this. I can't just let my possum take over and let it happen without me having any say. Make sense? The goal is to keep your frontal cortex online, and we do that through connection and Dr. Perry's 6 R's, which we'll talk about at the very end. All right, so tactile sense. So now I went, yes, question.
I just have a quick question, kind of with like the picking and choosing your battles.
Yeah.
We work with teens, and a lot of ours have had issues with like trust and stuff like that. When you're
Did you say you work with teens who have had issues with trust or drugs?
drugs,
Drugs, gotcha.
how when you're picking and choosing that battle, at what point
Yeah. So drugs, typically, I would ask, what kind of drug is it? Is it meth? Are they looking for a stimulant? Are they looking for marijuana, which is a depressant, or alcohol, which is a depressant? So that's the first thing I do. And if they are going towards the cocaines, the meths, the stimulants, then I know that they're in a watchdog response. And they're trying to match their energy with something that matches their watchdog. If they are going the more depressant route, then I know that they're more possum energy. And so once I determine what is the need behind the behavior, why are they seeking that drug? And a lot of addiction programs will talk about connection is the antidote for addiction, right? So if I'm working with teens and they feel like they need to go to those substances, in the beginning of our therapeutic work, I don't push it. And I don't go cold turkey for lots of reasons. One, you need to medically withdraw from some of these things, so that's a bad idea to go cold turkey anyway. And then I want to have a relationship with that teen, and I want to say, why are you seeking this to escape? What is so bad that you have to escape your reality by using these drugs? And then can I somehow give you hope that that is not all that is there? And so we have a really good addiction portion for our farm. And so we put these people in charge of our rabbits and we give them a purpose. And we're like, the rabbits are counting on you. You know, you need to be here and, you know, they need to be socialized, blah, blah, blah. Maybe they're cleaning out the stalls. Like we give them that purpose. And then we're working on the communication, or not communication, but the connection with our animals, because people are really scary. Right? And people have let me down so many times. I have a whole lot of pathways that tell me those people are not safe. And so we work to build connections instead. So yeah, I would say that even with drugs, and in the beginning especially, I don't come down real hard on it because I recognize you're going to that drug for a reason. And I can't just take away the drugs because guess what? You're going to find other drugs. And you will find ways to hide the drugs, or you'll move to cutting. So you might go from marijuana today, I take the marijuana away, you're still looking for your possum response, so you start doing self-harm in other ways. And it's the same thing if you don't hit that underlying. And also thinking about, so from the occupational therapy standpoint, what sensations are they getting from being high? And spoiler alert, if you spin on a swing sideways, if I put you in side lying and I spin you, then it actually engages the semicircular canals of your vestibular system, and it gives you a euphoric high. So if you like to smoke pot, I might put you on a swing. If you like meth, I might put you on a trampoline. Because again, I'm giving that real intense rhythmic movement. So I'm trying to figure out what sensations are you getting from this behavior that is not healthy or legal, and how can I replace it with other things? With connection. I didn't just light a candle for Jacopo's stinkiness. I lit a candle and then we talked about how we both felt the same way. I lit a candle and I talked about how we were fixing the problem together. And again, I work with animals, and so I don't always put myself in that first. Sometimes I'll just put it in with the animals. And we have a sheep named Sean, and Sean is going through puberty right now. He's humping everything and he's headbutting everything. So he's a great animal for our teenage boys. And they can see themselves in Sean. And so we talk about, what does Sean need in this moment? And do you think you would benefit as well? All right. So I want to kind of break this down. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on these because they're in the book that you literally have at your fingertips right now. So, but this is kind of the core of what I do as an OT. There are the 8 senses that we're going to just kind of go over briefly. And my goal for today is to kind of tie these senses into trauma, because we're talking about neurodevelopmental healing through the sensory system from developmental trauma, right? So the tactile sense is a big deal because it's the first to develop in utero. The skin is your largest receptive organ, so it's easy to access, right? It's easy to provide therapeutic input. Much of the baby's first tactile or first sensations come through the tactile system. And what if the baby doesn't like touch? right? So most of the calming things that we do with a baby are soothing and stroking them. Now, I'm going to ask you a question. Again, getting back to those, the trauma sensory activities of that rhythm, repetition, and relationship. And these are all from Dr. Perry's 6 R's, which are on a later slide. Is it rhythmic, repetitive, relational, rewarding, relevant, and respectful? Those are his R's that he talks about. That's what makes a good activity. But I really focus on that rhythm, repetition, and relationship. So what if the baby, like think about all the things, we've got a baby in the room right now, right? Sweet little baby. So when you touch the baby, are you touching the baby rhythmically or irrhythmically? Rhythmic. All that touch that goes into that baby is in a rhythmic. We pat the baby and we bounce them, right? And we do these things in that rhythm, right? We don't just touch the baby. If we touch the baby one time, the baby alerts to us. Versus if we rub, again, we're going in that different pathway. The rubbing and the light touch are 2 different pathways, right? The other thing is touch will last up to 2 hours. So you can give a good hug, you can go swimming, you can wear your favorite sweatshirt, you can get a massage, you can put lotion on your body, and those effects will carry you for about 2 hours. And that's why your socks bother you in the beginning maybe, but they don't notice them 2 hours later, right? And that's something that to highlight too, there is something called sensory integration, and we call it sensory processing integration. And some people have difficulty with sensory processing integration. And if I break that down to you, it's sensations, things that come in through the neurons of the body that go up into the brain, and then the brain processes what to do with the sensations that it felt, and then it integrates it by tying in those different parts of the brain. Can I think about it? Can I have an emotion about it? Can I have a feeling about it? Can I know what to do? Can I predict things because of this sensation? Can I tie them together? That's integration. And what happens for some kids is that integration does not happen because they didn't get the normal developmental sequences of integrating the senses. If this baby is getting bathed by this person, this caregiver's warmth as she's holding her or him, she's bouncing, right? All these things. But if that was not predictable, then her nervous system is not going to develop pathways that will integrate those sensations as good and happy, right? So we do have kids that their tactile system feels like it's on fire. We have kids that are way more sensitive to smell than any other kids because smell is we'll talk about it. It's a very protective response. And so if you're on alert all the time, your sense of smell is always going to be heightened because it's a great warning signal for the brain that something is not right. So knowing that about the tactile system, can we do our touch to be more deep pressure than light? Just knowing the pathways that it comes in on. Can I touch you differently? And this is where I say as a group, a lot of people don't like to be touched and you don't like to be touched by strangers. Why? It's not predictable. You can't control how a stranger touches you. That's why touch is safe in an intimate relationship, but it is not on the subway. Right? You don't want to be touched by your grocery clerk. But you want to be touched by people you love. But I am going to ask you to get out of your comfort zone a little bit. And again, all consensual, you can say no. But if you were to lean to the person next to you that you don't know, someone you don't know, and ask them to touch you lightly and then touch you deeply, and then take a mental note of how that felt different to your nervous system. So let's take 30 seconds. If you're willing, touch someone, like get consent. May I touch you? And then touch them light and then touch them deep. Okay, let me get you all back. Come on back. All right, I went a little bit arrhythmic to pull you back in, to alert you back to me. What's the energy in this room right now? You all are chirping like little birds. You are chirpy little birds, which tells me that the stress response of this room just went up an octave or two. Yeah. And you want to know neurologically why? You didn't predict that coming in here. You didn't know that I was going to say touch a stranger when you walked into this room. Now, who is willing or, interested in, like, how did that feel for you? Anybody want to tell me? Like, anybody have any aha moments during that little experience? Other than the whole room went a buzz and alerted all of you? Anybody want to say? Yeah. I'll even give you a signed book. Here we go. This is how we get audience participation. Here, I'll give you the mic. He can still feel where he touched him on the shoulder. Yeah. It's tense. He still feels it, and you will for 2 hours. I'm so sorry. I love that. So what that tells me was a hyper response for you. Yeah, as it should have been. Yeah. My friend that I just met, okay.
She just came in late just a little while ago, and she absolutely she was sitting next to me, and I didn't know it. She asked me if she could sit here. I said, oh yeah, and I wanted to make her feel comfortable for whatever she was doing, so I gave her a nice little pat. So just now we talked about it, I'm like, I already touched you. I didn't think about it, but I tried to picture it. She's like,
Yeah. So she's giving an example. It wasn't exactly what we were doing, but her friend came in and sat down next to her, and as a greeting, as a, hey, welcome to be here, she tapped on her. But did you tap irrhythmically or did you tap rhythmically? It was rhythmic, I can promise you. And the reason I'm going to be so confident in that is she mimicked it to me when she told me about it. When she replayed the scenario in her mind, she gave me a rhythmic tap. Yeah, over here. I love when it starts out, my new friend and I. This is great. Yeah, she spun around and said, can I touch you, to this man right here. It's great. And then one for you too. Okay, so you touched a stranger, yeah. Okay. It was a connecting moment for her. So she said she touched the guy behind her, and she noticed. This is what I love, though. Remember when I said when we get to times of stress, our brain takes snapshots. We remember the bacon. We fill in pieces that aren't even there when something happens. I touched his hand. It felt cool or warm, and it was soft, or cool and soft. So she's adding things in. Those are 2 other sensations. And she's going to remember that. And he said that it was lovely. She said it was lovely. His love language is touch, and she said, I want to hug you, right? So that was a very connecting situation. Yeah. 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 Yeah, I love this. So she had a Sheldon Cooper moment where she was like, they're there, right? Didn't want to hurt her. She doesn't know her well enough. She's not in a relationship with her to know how to touch her, right? And so she was very light. And then her friend took her hand and pushed it deeper, like, no, I like to be touched more firmly. Let's think about kids in our care. Do we give them the autonomy to take our hand and guide how we touch them? Or are we so worried about touch that we don't touch them at all, and we're very guarded, and we have all these rules around touch? But in that moment, she had the autonomy to be able to have her friend give feedback of how she wants to be touched, and that's a beautiful thing. That is communication and relationship. Yeah, I'll take one more.
So I think it's interesting because touch it doesn't bother me.
Okay, touch doesn't bother her.
So for me, as you're saying, you need to think about these kids, but I have to take a step back and
Yeah.
actually. So my friend and I, we
Okay, so
And so she did not ask. But all of a sudden, I'm realizing she's been sitting there tapping my arm, and I didn't even notice.
she didn't even notice that she was getting tapped. Yeah.
I mean, I love touch. And when you asked earlier what's your calm, it was when my husband has
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, but I thought that was interesting that it just didn't even.
Yeah, so this is, and I love these classes, you guys. This just fills my bucket so much to talk to you guys, because I love meeting people and seeing the connections and really celebrating our diversities and celebrating how we feel and sense things so differently. And so her summary of her story was that her friend was tapping her, and she didn't even notice it. And the reason neurologically that she didn't notice it is because she loves to be touched. Touched is one of her love languages. And so, again, her brain didn't cue it as unsafe. So when we go back to that second slide that I showed you about the 11 trillion sensations that are coming in, and we can only attend to 40 to 50 of them, she didn't cue that as unsafe, so she didn't even notice it. My new friend over here, touch may not be his big thing. I don't know, I'm making an assumption. But he's going to remember that for a couple more minutes. We had two very different experiences in a room full of fully functional, highly respected people, right? Yeah, and then I'm going to have to move on. I'm going to go, yeah.
I was just going to say, we're best friends.
Uh-huh.
We didn't even have to look at each other to know either of us were participating.
I love this. She says,
With other people or with each other.
yeah. Yeah, and so she says, we are best friends, we have the relationship, we have that felt safety together, but we also have the relationship to know that neither of us are touchers. And we just had an eye glance, and we both understood that we were not participating in this situation. And that is the thing, and if I have time, I'll come back to you, but we got to keep moving through. But that's the whole point is, how many things do we as adults moderate and control that we don't allow the kids to control, right? Can we just shift our perspective of, is it okay for people to have different sensory preferences? And if they have different sensory preferences, how can I, as the one who has the bigger owl in my brain, who has more access to my frontal cortex, how can I change my behaviors to help this person feel more comfortable, feel more connected, so that their stress response decreases, their window of tolerance opens, and they stop doing the crap that makes me crazy, right? Because that's what I come to speak at these things, and people are like, well, how do you get them to quit kicking my chair? That's what you want to know. And I'm here to tell you, one, you let them kick your chair for a little while, and they'll get tired of it. Or you let them kick a ball, or you let them kick a band, or you put different things in their shoes so that they feel their toes. You teach them to run. You find a way to replace what they're looking for. But that's up to you. The kid can't do that. They're too young. They can't think of the strategies themselves, and they can't access them when they're in a moment of stress. And that's what the arousal continuum is really all about, because when we're stressed, we don't make good decisions. We've all done that. We've gone home and been like, this is what I should have said. I had the perfect comeback. But in the moment, you're like, I lost my words. And that's what profanity is. I tell my children all the time. Profanity is just a lack of access to your good adjectives. That's all it is. If you can't think of other words, those come out real easy because they're practiced. And they're really proprioceptive, and they feel good on your lips. And there's actual studies, because the way that the words come out, they end in K's and T's, and really like proprioceptive sounds, and they come from your belly. Nobody says, fudge! No, they say, fudge! Like it comes from down here. And just the act of saying the words brings in the diaphragm and those proprioceptive feelings that then calm you down, right? Okay, that's the tactile system. Is it expected? Do we have control? Olfactory, the sense of smell. Now, it should only last as long as the input, unless it's synthetic, in which case you're going to have that extra receptor we talked about. It's the direct path to the amygdala, to the long-term memory. The example I use in my book is when I came upon my first fatality, There was an accident and there was radiator fluid everywhere. I still can't smell radiator fluid without taking me entirely back to that moment. It's like a flashback. And what's interesting, in a trauma response, your sense of time diminishes because when you are in acute trauma, the part of the arousal continuum that is your sense of time shuts down. And that's why kids lie to you all the time too. In case you're wondering why someone will look you dead in the eye with cake all over their face and say, I didn't eat the cake. Because their sense of time and that stress response says, I can't think about 10 minutes from now when I realize that you realize that I've eaten the cake. All I can think of is this very moment I feel like you're gonna hit me and I have to deny and keep myself safe. So lying is less about being deceitful and more about not being able to predict the time of when things are going to come back and bite you in the butt. So lying is a possum response to decrease the threat in that moment by dissociating from it and not having the sense of time to know that this is a bad strategy. So lying is a behavior response that gives me the clue that you don't feel like you have power because you're going into the possum pathway, right? But the amygdala, that long-term memory, you lose your sense of time, but you keep your sense of smell. So you may not know how long the event was. You'll lose that. You'll see your life flash before you, but you will be able to tell what smells were there. And what's fascinating about that is it's very primitive. And there are smells that are coded into your DNA. And they will also be coded into your DNA based on geography of where you lived, right? Everybody's afraid of fire in the beginning until you start going camping and roasting s'mores and you build new pathways of how smoke isn't scary. But everybody senses smoke as a danger at first. It is part of your DNA. And it will also influence your taste. If you had COVID and you lost your sense of smell, nothing tasted good for you either. And that's interesting. And so if you have picky eaters, in my book I have a whole page on that. One of the things that you can do is freeze the food because it doesn't smell as much. If you heat food up, the particles will actually escape with the moisture particles, and they will go up into the nasal cavities and influence your smell. So that's why hot foods are more savory and they have more like smell and they have more emotion that go with them as well. So when you think about foods that bring you emotional responses, they have high scents to them. Bread, coffee. I can't think of anything else right now, but there you go. So practical application. What are the smells in your classroom if you're a teacher, in your home if you're living, doing foster care? What are the smells like? Yes?
I need to go back to the line. You quoted it really, really good about the lion response.
The lion response? Oh, the lying response. I'm like, lions? Did I talk about tigers and lions? My dad wanted a tiger. He didn't want a lion. We just wanted tigers. Sorry. The lying is a dorsal vagal response. It is part of the possum pathway because you don't have a sense of time to know that it's going to come back to you. When you start going down the dissociative continuum from Dr. Perry, the dorsal vagal from polyvagal, and the possum from Robin Goebel, like these are all the same theories that just analyze differently. I like the possum pathway because they're just so freaking cute, right? Like this little possum, I'm so sad. And it takes the shame away from, being a jerk. That is not in there, but if you Google Robin Goebel, Watchdogs and Possums, it's there. She didn't come out with her book until after I wrote my book. And so it's not in there. But, but lying is very much a lack of sense of time and awareness. And it is a people-pleasing move, really. If I just tell you what I think you will make you happy, even though I know it's going to really make you mad because now I'm invading the trust between us, but I can't think of that because I don't have my frontal cortex accessible to me. And lying is just the way to be a possum and just shut it down so that I don't have to deal with it. And it is also a symptom that I feel like I don't have any control here. Because if you feel like you have all the control in the world, you don't lie about things. Yeah, I did it. What you gonna do about it? That's the watchdog. Did you eat the cookie? Mm-hmm, and I would do it again. That's a watchdog. Did you eat the cookie? No, ma'am. That's a possum. Did you eat the cookie? Yeah, I did, and I'm really sorry. That's the owl. Right? That's the different way the animals will answer that question. Yeah, I did. How can I make it better? Because the owl wants to connect. The possum, yes, I did. Take the attention off of me. Don't look at me. Let me disappear because I know I've upset you and I can't fix this. Yeah, I did. What are you going to do about it? Yes, I did. I don't feel connected to you, and I feel like pushing back from you is my best plan for safety. All right. So what smells do we have? And here's the thing. In my book, there's a whole guide, like chart that'll tell you sweet smells tend to be connecting, whereas the more floral and things like that can sometimes be a little bit more distancing. Mint is a great, and mint and cinnamon. I love that you guys had those little cinnamon things and you ate them right when you came back from the break because that alerted you a little bit. That woke you up so that we could make it to lunch, right? If you ate a butterscotch, y'all would be comatose right now. You eat some Werther's after the break, I lose you because you disengaged from me. It puts you in the calm specters, right? What smells did they experience at that traumatic event? Right? Radiator fluid for me. Anybody else? Dr. Perry's book, it was the Old Spice cologne for this kid. We all have smells that trigger us into like, ooh, I can't do that. And we come back, and that's the whole no timestamp. When there's no timestamp on traumatic events, that smell will take you back as if it's happening right now because your brain doesn't go, oh, I have a sense of time and this happened in the past. Your brain goes, I have no sense of time, so it might as well be happening right now. And smell will take you back to the right now because you've lost that sense of time. Vision, it's located in the back of the brain, and the brain develops from the back to the front, from the inside to the out. So vision is one of the earliest senses to be impacted developmentally. So if you are on your back all the time and you're in a neglectful situation, your eyes do not track. You will have oral motor difficulty if you are not put in tummy time because the eye muscles develop in what we call prone. And you lift your head up, and here's the interesting thing. If you are on your belly, there's a occipital process in the back of your skull that hits your vertebrae when you lift your head up, and it forces your eyes to look around. If you are constantly carried forward facing, or you're in a bouncy seat or a car seat, and you're never put on your stomach, guess what? Your eyes never have to move up and look around. Now, when we think about the visual sense, there's a whole like forensic science on eye movements and emotions. And I won't get into all of that today, but I will say what happens to your eyes when you're trying to hold your stuff together? Where do they go? You've seen it in the movies. They're like, woo! We do some rhythmic, repetitive flapping to bring our arousal down, and our eyes go up. Because up is part of a dissociative response. There's actually dissociative scales in trauma work with how high up do their eyes roll into the back of their head, because that's what they do when you dissociate. But if I am always in this position and I'm never in this position and my eye muscles don't pull up, I lose the capacity to calm myself through that system. And then what happens, instead of being able to lift my eyes up and be like, whew, take a breath, lift your eyes, I end up moving my head on the axis of my vertebrae. And so I walk into a room. When you walk into a room, you scan it with your eyes. Now, if you'll all do this experiment with me, here's your experiential for the vision. Have your head straight ahead and fix your neck so that your neck does not pivot, and kind of look left to right as much as you can. And notice how much peripheral vision you're taking in. It's not a lot. It's not a lot of peripheral. And the peripheral is the excitatory tract that comes in. Things that are picked up in your periphery go into the alert zone of your brain. And things that are picked up in the in the medial area, your focal vision, that's your calm portion. So what happens for our kids that don't have good oral or eye or visual motor skills? Now move your head on an axis and look around the room. The majority of you, because we're all different, the majority of you will experience an uptick in your arousal. Because as you twist your head, you're taking in more peripheral vision. You're getting more of those 11 trillion data bits that you're trying to process, and you're getting flooded and overwhelmed. And you have just stimulated the vestibular canal that is on the upregulating pathway as well. So your kids that want to wear hoodies, your kids that want to wear ball caps, your kids that are trying to break out the visual, it's because they cannot visually attend by themselves. So they're using strategies to block out the external vision. Does that give you some compassion? Does it help you not make them take their ball cap off? Does it make them not have to take their hoodie off? A kid that's wearing a hoodie legit wants to connect with you because they're trying to block out the external stuff. But we, in our society, see that as disrespectful. And we have put labels on strategies that are actually connective strategies that further push people away, which is fascinating to me. So once we're aware of it, we can change the way we see the behavior, and then it helps to connect. And then eventually, if we know that the issue, I promise you, I don't know the exact statistics, and I love to say that, 90% of statistics are made up. It's one of my favorite sayings. I don't know what the answer is. But there's a really high number of kids that come into the foster care that their eyes have oral motor dysfunction because they did not get the developmental movements that they needed very early in life. So I challenge you to walk up to the kids in your care, take your finger, and say, hold your head really still and follow my finger. And my made-up statistic of 85% of these kids, they're going to do this. And especially if you go up, their head is going to move up. Now, real quick, everybody throw your head back and tell me if you get more alert or less. I just heard an oh gosh. Because your body just initiated the Moro reflex, which is the fear reflex, and it prepares your body to fall backwards, which says everything engage and protect yourself. Head up the arousal continuum because you're falling backwards, and your vestibular sense says that's a bad idea. You can't see what's coming. You can't predict where you're going to land. So your kids that are constantly looking up like this, they're engaging reflexes that increase their arousal. So yeah, lots of things like that. Midline is calming, periphery is alerting, and then the muscle weakness leads to engagement. We talked about all those things. So how do you present things to your students or your kids? Do you say, do you want the red cup? Or do you say, do you want the red cup? See the difference? Holding things up here forces them to look back versus coming up. That's why when you come upon an accident scene, one of the first things they say is get down on their level or below. Now, there is a power differential that is subconscious of somebody being over you, but it's also part of the visual sense. Looking down is calming, looking up is alerting, right? And by that, I mean when you're using your neck. If you just look up with your eyes, it's actually calming because you're engaging the dissociative reflexes. So how are you presenting things? What's the visual clutter in the space where you're interacting? Is there a lot of stimulation out here in the periphery that they're being pulled to? Because that's alerting. Also in the book, I talk about points being alerting, curves being calming, different colors will be alerting versus calming. Your blues and more natural greens are going to have a calming influence, whereas the yellows and the reds are going to be more alerting. So how can we be aware of the colors, the patterns, and the placement of things in our environments? When I talk about how can we adapt the environment to decrease the stress response so that the window's open, these are some of the strategies we'll talk about. Gustatory sense. I like to say that word. I like a word that's about my tongue to roll off the tongue in a fun way, right? And for some reason, gustatory makes me think of ratatouille. I don't know why. But If you have seen Ratatouille, you know the scene where Ego sits down to eat the ratatouille, which is a poor man's dish, right? And he's this food critic, and he's transported back to his childhood where he grew up, and his mom made him ratatouille, right? Because food is tied to emotional memory, very tied to emotional memory. So when things happen to our mouth that are not pleasant emotions, we tie into that as well. It can be positive or negative. And it's like a primal reaction. You don't eat something and go, do I like this? Sometimes you do if it's a complex texture and taste, but most of the time you have a pretty strong reaction of you like it or you don't. And here's where I will go back to food as community. What is the next step after I eat something and I say, this tastes terrible? And what is the next thing that comes out of my mouth? Try this. Right? If you hear no other example of how misery loves company and people want to be seen in their sensory distress, we want to be mirrored. I don't eat something and go, oh my gosh, this is terrible. Trust me. No, here, you try it. That is the worst thing to do to another human. I experienced something terrible and now I want to force it on you. Why do we do that? Why? Because we're flocking. It is that first level of stress. We're like, wow, this stressed me out. I need to get confirmation from my other birds in the room and see if I'm crazy. Or does this taste bad to you too? I want confirmation of my distress because that's what flocking is. So when I come to you and say these shoes are uncomfortable, I'm flocking to you. And I need you to say, yeah, they're pretty bad. Or, I'm curious what makes them so bad. I want you to be curious. I want you to take note. And I want you to join in just a little bit of my dysregulation so that I don't feel like I'm crazy, right? I need that validation because you know what? So much of my life for our kids, I was shamed for my feelings. And I've been shamed for having biological responses based on my past experiences that made me view and experience things differently than normative people, right? So, various tastes register in different parts of the tongue. So that's an interesting, there's a thing, I just saw this. I don't know if it's true or not. Not everything, guess what, guys? Not everything on the internet is true. Surprise. But I did see something that, I think it's in Japan. They're giving tongue covers to kids so that they'll take medication. So it's like this little balloon that they put on their tongue so that they can't taste the stuff that they're feeding. I don't know if that's safe. That sounds like a choking hazard to me, but whatever. Food is a social connector and a survival need and security. If I was told I couldn't eat when I was a young child, I was told I didn't deserve to live. So yeah, of course I'm gonna hide food in your house. Of course I'm gonna have food insecurities. And of course I'm gonna be real picky about the foods that I eat because food is connection. And of course I'm gonna refuse that food that you made for me because I don't feel connected to you. So food is a big thing. They're highly emotional, and it's emotional on both sides. If you've read my book, you know about the chicken pills. So my daughter and I had a rough start. That's how it works. I had a rough start. I hadn't found TBRI yet. I had a rough start with my daughter. We've done a ton of repair. We have a great relationship right now, but it took a lot of work to get there because I was a very dissociative mom when she was born. And part of that was feeding was really difficult for Susie and I. And so in my book, I talk about how she wouldn't eat anything and I felt like such a failure as a mother that I legit went to the pharmacy and I got those gel capsules that you can put vitamins in. You know what I'm talking about? You can buy them empty. And I literally ground chicken and stuffed chicken in these little bitty pills. That is a desperate woman right there. That is a level of desperate that I share with you that is boggling to me at 20 years later. But I was so desperate to try and get protein in her because society told me that she needs to have these proteins and you're a bad mom if she won't eat chicken nuggets, right? And so I did, as an OT, I was like, well, fine, I will adapt this thing. My kid could take a pill better than anybody. I was raising a drug addict. I was not raising a chicken eater. And she would take these pills, and so we called them chicken pills. And like, that's crazy sauce, guys. But that tells you how desperate I was to be willing to go through those whole hoops. And it's interesting hearing, the more I immerse myself in these compassionate practices and pulling the lens back and recognizing that when you're under stress, you can't think, and then having the ability to hold capacity with community to be able to pull back and say, wow, Marty Smith, you were really stressed that you thought this was your best plan of action. Versus, hey, my kid doesn't have to eat chicken. The world is not going to end if my kid doesn't eat chicken. But the problem was my window was so closed because she wasn't eating chicken and protein and the things that all my friends told me she had to eat, that I could not think of the possibility of just being okay with her not eating chicken. And I had to force them into little pills, right? But now I've grown and I've accessed my frontal cortex. And I'm like, yeah, you don't have to eat chicken, Susie, but hey, have some beans, right? Have some edamame. Have some other things that have protein in them. So I say that to know it's hard on the kid and it's also hard on the caregiver. So if you're working with parents of children who are picky eaters, recognize that their window is probably a little small because they're having shame and they're having some issues that are closing their window as well. So decrease the shame for them, provide support for them, their window will open, and then the child's window will mirror and open up as well. And it's also tied to oral motor function and nutrition. If I have oral motor dysfunction, if my tongue doesn't move around well, if I have speech delays, then it's hard for me to eat meat. And we look at the things that the kids are picky eaters about, meats and spinaches and lettuces and carrots and things like that. Well, think about the oral complexity that it takes to eat a hard carrot versus a soft carrot. So can we cook the vegetables, but then make them cold so they don't smell, right? And then can we get the nutrition in that way? Can we make smoothies? Because smoothies don't require tongue movements. They just go right down, and they're cold, so they decrease some of the sensations, right? And they decrease the smell when you have a cap on them as well. So smoothies, I'm a huge fan of smoothies for picky eaters. So practical application. Can you offer snacks and beverages as relational connection? And can you offer it during a time when the child's window is most likely to be open? So many people try and do food introduction and food therapies during dinner time. Well, I don't know about you, but we called 3 to 6 p.m. the gangrene hour in my house. Everybody's windows were starting to close. And if the window wasn't closed, the shades were coming down, right? So don't try new therapies when no one's at their best. Bring them in on the weekends in the morning when they're a little more fresh and open. Can you bring awareness for mints or hard candies and things like that, things that'll perk you up oral motor wise? And can you do rhythmic, repetitive input? Like, can you find foods that are chewy that will help decrease the stress response? Because you have, now Susie would be able to tell you, again, I'm going to make up a statistic. How many teeth do we have? Does anybody actually know this? I know there's like 52 cards and 26 letters. How many? 24? That seems low, but let's go with it. I don't care. All right, she says, she said it with authority. So for right now, we're going to assume there's 32 teeth in your brain. That would be really creepy. Then you have a twin that you have absorbed at birth, right? And if you don't get that reference, you didn't go to med school. But let's say we have 32 teeth. Every tooth has a joint with proprioceptive receptors. So as you're chewing, you're stimulating maybe 32 points of contact and sending that chemical into your brain of calm through chewing. That's why the foods that comfort us tend to be rhythmic, repetitive, chewy types of things, right? All right, vestibular sense. That is your sense of movement. Now, if you look in the book, I don't know what page it's on, but there is a diagram or an illustration that will show you all the different canals. I don't think it's on these slides, no. But basically what the vestibular sense is, and when I did my big sensory integrated processing training, Julia Harper was the OT that I worked with, and I love this analogy. She said that the vestibular sense is the mafia boss of all of the senses. It's the big one. And so much so that she called him Mr. V. And she says, if Mr. V is not happy, your whole system shuts down. And think about that, right? The most dysregulating things that kids do tend to involve the vestibular system. They are running around like crazy. They're rocking, they're moving, they're just, the head is very active when someone is going up in their stress response. Or it becomes very still if they go that possum pathway, right? But you can just imagine a watchdog ripping up that toy in the backyard. The head is shaking around and spinning, and so the head gets very active when we hit that upper arousal. But it changes how the brain interprets the sensation based on how the head is positioned. So for example, my families that have the little infants, you will notice a difference when we call the caudal-cephal canal, which is the head to butt. Most babies calm when we bounce them head to butt. So we hold them upright and we go up and down like this, or we put them on their back and we do this with them, right? We're moving, the way that the head the way that the body, the brain know where we are in regards to movement is how these canals have fluid in them and then these little hair projections. And then as the fluid moves, those hairs bend. They're called cilia, they bend. And then they send, that cilia are those 11 trillion receptors that send signals to the brain that say, this is where the head is, and this is how you are in relation to gravity, right? And so as it moves at this plane, then centrifugal force kind of forces the fluid into it, and it tells the body that your head is moving this way or your head is moving this way. So sitting here, if you move your head up and down or you bounce up and down like this is going to be a more rhythmic, calming type of interaction versus shaking your head no. That's going to give people a little more up alert. Does this make sense? Which I love in the United States, when we hate something, we emphatically do this, which is like, no. And that kind of escalates our arousal. Just by saying no, it escalates our vestibular response, right? And if it's arrhythmic, if our head movements are not rhythmic and predictable, then it will also raise us along that arousal continuum. It'll engage that watchdog a little bit more, right? So thinking about how is the head positioned when someone is moving around will give us clues to where they are on that arousal continuum. So the proximity to auditory and link to visual, a fun little party trick if anybody wants to do it. You have something called a vestibular ocular reflex. And so if you hold your thumb out at like distance here, and you're welcome to do this, I invite you to do this now. Hold your thumb out and then move your head. And you can keep your thumb in focus because your eyes will lock on that. But now just move your thumb back and forth and your eyes can't keep up, right? Because your brain is designed to have the head can move, but the eyes will stay locked. But if the eyes try and move independent of the head, then it actually like dysregulates you a little bit and things become blurry, right? So the system is set up to receive that input. And that's why when you're on a boat and you lock your eyes on the horizon, another little tip, another party trick if you want, if someone gets dizzy easily, they get motion sickness, they vomit in the car and all that kind of stuff, take your arms and shake them rhythmically. So I'll show you a little trick real quick. So when you're sick, start out here and bring your hands in, lock them, and then bring them this way. And when you do that, you're providing shaking, which is a nervous system deactivator. You're engaging the peripheral system, which is meeting you where you are because your body is like, I'm feeling very activated. So activated, I'm gonna vomit. And so then the brain is like, I feel matched with this rhythmic alerting out in the periphery movement. And then it comes to midline to calm you down, comes in nice and stable. And then that's the whole like, meet them where they are, catch them, and bring them down with you. And you can do that to yourself as well. So if you get sick, next time you get on a teeter-totter or whatever, try that movement and you'll be like, oh, that's amazing. Doesn't work for everybody all the time, but it helps. Because your vestibular system is tied to your stomach. It's tied to the vagus nerve, right? And so all of these systems, your eyes are going to dilate, your hearing is going to be impacted if you have vertigo. Like it's all tied together. That's why it's called the polyvagal theory. Poly means many, and the vagus nerve attaches to many different organs. So it has these massive effects on your whole body because of the way the anatomy is connected. So there you go. It's highly sensitive to safety and threat registration. When you feel an earthquake, your whole system goes up, right? Because your body is being moved and you're not in control of it. So, how is the body positioned for a sense of safety? Real quick, if you come forward, that's the calming response. And if you come backwards, that's the alerting response. So if you're talking to somebody, my teachers, if you want to talk to a student and you come up behind them and they're forced to look at you like this, you've just put them in an activated posture. Instead, come to the front of their desk and bend down, the head will come forward and you've put them in a calming posture. When your child is running around like a Tasmanian devil and they're just like, woo, one, you're going to look for the rhythm. Are they running in a pattern where it's predictable? Then that child is actually trying to calm themselves down, and maybe you just let it happen. You let it run out and run its course so that they can bring themselves down naturally. Or are they bouncing off the walls? That kid needs more stimulation. They're not feeling met. They need this kind of stuff to bring them in and feel matched, to be in that heightened arousal state. But how are they moving? How is the head moving around? Where is the head in relation to their spine and feet? Because all the canals are basically between your two ears and behind your eyes. So when you're looking, it's kind of like, how is the head in relation to the spine? And that'll tell you what canals you're innervating. And then rocking and shaking will reset the vestibular system as well. So rocking and shaking are really good ways. If you have that kid that's running around and you're like, whoa, I'm getting nauseous just watching you, see if maybe you can put something like a weighted blanket on them or have them jumping up and down, having them stomp as they're running around, add something that's proprioceptive to the movement to help bring them down. As they're running around, have them look at the floor. So it brings their head forward. The floor is lava is a great game because it forces the head into the downward position. So as they're already climbing your furniture and running around, you can be like, hey, floor is lava. Look at the floor. Or you can have an interesting pattern on the floor. You could just throw something down. You've got a bowl of Cheerios in your hand. Throw the Cheerios down and be like, do you see those Cheerios? They'll look down. And then that will bring that arousal down through the sensory system. That proprioceptive sense, this is the powerhouse. Mr. V will jack you up, right? But Mr. P is going to calm you down. And again, all these calming sensations come through this proprioceptive sense. Where are we in space? And the relational influence. Almost all these anything relational is going to go through that proprioceptive system. We were created through relationship. The actual act of inception is through a relationship. Two people came together to have this relationship, and it was a proprioceptive experience to make that happen. So from the beginning of your DNA forming, it's proprioception. When you are an infant, it's that patting, right? Even the sucking of getting the milk, bearing down to have your first bowel movements. Everything is proprioceptive in our body that makes us feel better. If you've had a real good bowel movement, it's that bearing down and then you feel better. If you've gotten really mad and you do this and then you feel better. It's that squeezing of the muscle bellies that creates literal endorphins that go up into your brain and pumps in chemistry that says, calm down. That's proprioception. And you can have internal influence by feeling your heart beat against your rib cage. You can feel that internal proprioception. And you can also have a whole lot of external with proprioception. Hugs, weighted blankets, jumping on the trampoline, dancing, jogging together. All of these things can help bring in that patting movement. And we talked in the tactile system about how that deeper rhythmic touch is often felt better, but not always based on our past experiences. So do we have access to weighted blankets? Or does it feel too resistive? If I have someone that has sexual trauma that was held down, I am not going to give them a weighted blanket unless they ask for it. Sometimes it feels like a force field to them. So again, communication and relationship and connection are the key to that strategy. Can you provide rhythmic tapping? There's even EMDR, and I don't remember what the actual theory is called or method is called, but there's a whole thing where you tap here, you tap here, you tap here, like you do these tapping sequences where you're tapping on the meridians and it calms the body down. So tapping is a wonderful de-escalator, right? But it has to be in a way that's accepted and it seems relational and relevant to the person. And a lot of our stems, if you look at the stems, a lot of them are very repetitive and proprioceptive. And then how much pressure and how is it being interpreted? The auditory sense, quick reaction, it ties to the vestibular. So if you think about music, you've got that rhythm, you've got the beat, you can feel that proprioceptively in your bones. And so it's tied to like wanting to move when you see it. And then the rhythm of life. What is the energy? What is the cadence of this situation? It's culturally connective. You can connect to your culture through music. That's why we have different radio stations and different genres of music, because it's very culturally tied. And it also is dependent on your inner ear health. Families that have a lot of smoke in the home, sometimes the kids will have increased ear infections, and that fluid buildup on their ear does cause differences in the eardrum being able to move, and so they will perceive sound differently simply based on environmental factors. So something to think about. We also have found that children with autism have lower immune responses, and so sometimes they have frequent ear infections and sinus infections, and so that pressure will also limit the amount of movement of the ear. And so guess what? When your ear develops and it doesn't get that full range of frequencies because of fluid being on the ear, then we become sensitive to it later because we don't have that past experience of positive auditory input from the time we're infants. Make sense? So that's tying in the whole what happened to you and how are you going to perceive sensations? How will it be different than others? And then do you feel heard by someone? That's a big thing too. What is the rhythm? And, can they wear headphones? If they have sensitivities, can we just give them headphones? That's a real low-hanging fruit. There's a not new, they've been out for a couple years, but there's earbuds called Calm, C-A-L-M, and you can put those in and it just dampens the noise a little bit for them, and that can be helpful too. So the interoceptive sense, that's straight up the vagus nerve right there. That's the nerve that connects all your innards together. And so it attaches your heart to your skin, to your lungs, to your kidneys, all of that. It's the inside, outside, and in between. It's your heart rate when you get anxious. It's your feelings and how your feelings interact with your body. And Bessel van der Kolk wrote the book, The Body Keeps the Score. It's getting a lot of flack right now because it's not, doesn't take women into effect, and there's lots of things, but the science of the body holding on to trauma still stands. And so truly, your interoceptive sense, and it's back because we take snapshots of sensory experiences and tie them together, and then we feel them. And the whole ACEs study is all about how our adverse experiences will impact our health outcomes later on. We're more likely to have diabetes, high blood pressure, and all these things depending on how many ACEs we have. Even cancer is tied to our adverse childhood experiences because we release chemicals and hormones with stress that do impact the development and the health of our systems. It's our biorhythms, our emotions, and it's a multi-level brain response. So you hear interoception. Kelly Mahler is an occupational therapist who is doing groundbreaking work in interoception, especially with the neurodiverse community. So Kelly Mahler, Mahler, is a good place. And also Amy Lewis is another really good OT that's studying a lot of interoception and bringing her work into trauma as well. So are we validating and non-shaming? Because when we hold on to shameful emotions, it makes our shoulders tight, which brings up our lungs, and we don't breathe as deep. We don't get as much oxygen to the frontal cortex. Everything is a chain on how the body is responding to sensations. Do you provide choices and opportunity for sensory exploration? Do you give the person autonomy and control so that the watchdog and the possum can relax a little bit and the owl will stay around a little longer? And do you understand how dissociation affects your students' ability to answer questions? And that's kind of like for the teachers in the room, the kids that are dissociating, they're the good kids in your classroom because they're not behavior problems. But the reality is they're in that possum pathway, and so they are not connected to their body. And that's why our kids that cut, our kids that have these self-injurious behaviors, they don't know how they feel, so they cut themselves to feel something, even if that something is pain. Because pain is easier to feel than shame. Pain is easier to feel than feeling unworthy. And we choose our feelings sometimes based on our past experiences. So safe sensations encourage calm and cortical learning. Try and keep that owl around as much as you can. As much as you can provide safety and connection, the owl loves safety and connection. And we can do hard things if we have a buddy. We can do hard things if we have a buddy. Like, let that sink in. I'm not asking you to not do hard things, because by the fact you're in this room right now, you're doing hard things. But if you have someone that you can call and talk to about those hard things, or that will experience them with you. I mean, a wonderful example is I was working in the schools, and there was this kid who had horrible gastrointestinal issues, and he was so stinky, like just stinky, stinky, stinky. And the TAs would always go in and do like that care together, and they would keep, like, they wouldn't shame the child. They could keep their stoic, like, oh, this is fine, everything's fine. And then they would look at each other and be like, and just that moment of laughter between the two of them, that moment of delight would give them that capacity to continue to do those hard things. And how many of you, like in my office at Simple Sparrow, that's one of the things that we are so good at, is the animals give us lots of opportunity to be like, blah. Like, did you see that? We flock. And when we flock and we're met with co-regulation, our window opens up. So when something happens and we're able to look at our friends and be like, oh my gosh, that was terrible. Yes, that was terrible. You ready to do it again? Mm-hmm. Let's go do it again. Oh my gosh, I'm exhausted. Did you sleep last night? No, I did not. Cool. Okay, I'm not in this alone. Right? We can co-regulate with each other and co-regulate with your kids. Yeah, buddy, this is hard. This is really hard. I get it. But I'm not going to leave you to do it by yourself. I'm going to help you with it. So we are made safe with that co-regulation. And the practical application for all of this is, can you change your sensory input? Can you change your opinion or your lens or your expectation? Can we actually teach the kids what we want from them without just expecting it? And when it's too high of an expectation, can we match that expectation to their capacity? Because if someone came in and gave you a job description that you couldn't meet, I think that's one of the reasons we have so much burnout in this system, is that people come into it with an expectation that you're going to cure these kids. And when I speak to churches, I'm like, let's just agree that Jesus is the only one that can save people. No one in this room is going to save these kids. That is not what we are called to do. We are called to love them, and that means loving them where they are and giving ourselves the compassion for maybe not making huge gains. But those little gains, it's just like my cup right here, the little things are the big things. And if we can keep that focus and we can keep each other accountable and we can have that buddy, then we'll show up the next day and the next day and the next day. And sometimes our sense of time is lost because our window is closing and we're up on that continuum and we can't see that this kid is going to sleep in my bed till they're 40. They don't. But when they're 6, 7, 8, it feels like they will. And we need a buddy to be like, this stinks. I am not enjoying this with you. And then that buddy saying, I don't enjoy this either, makes the owl come back to its roost just a little bit to open up your sense of time to be like, maybe when they're 16, they'll move out of my room. And until then, I can just not make this a big deal. And I can pick from the plethora of other options they've given me of things to be concerned about. Because there's always something else to be concerned about with these kids. Okay, if I am out of time, it is noon, it is lunch. I don't get all of you guys for the afternoon. I would love if you could give me another 15 minutes so I could show you something really cool. Can I have 15 more minutes, please? Okay, all right, I'm an OT. So occupational therapy is about finding activities. That's what we do. That's what we're trained to do, is do activity analysis and then figure out, like, what do we do to help these kids? So I created an algorithm with my husband based on Dr. Perry's work. So background, you'll read it in the book, but my husband is the coder that Dr. Perry connected with to write the code for his neurosequential model of therapeutics. Now, that model is vastly more complex than what I'm going to talk to you about right now. It involves trainings and case studies and mentorship, and it's a whole community. And it's a whole, like the NMT metric actually takes a lot of time to administer, and it takes into effect a lot of other things than what I'm going to show you right now. But a portion of the NMT is talking about different behaviors or different symptoms that we see based on brain function. And so that's the part that I have adapted with Dr. Perry's permission and my husband's knowledge and created an online test, if you will, or a questionnaire that will give you some generative activity ideas. So with that, we have to understand that we have to start meeting the need in the brainstem. We have to start calming them before we can, you know, in TBRI, they say we have to empower, then connect, and then correct. And then Dr. Perry's very early work talks about regulate, then relate, then reason. We have to go from the brainstem up. If I am living in fear, my owl has flown away and it can't help me make good decisions. So I have to understand that I have to first feed the watchdog and possum to calm them down, invite the owl back, and then I can have thought-based, cognitive-based strategies, right? So a lot of the strategies are sensory-based because I'm the occupational therapist. It's based on the neurosequential model, and any intervention that you're looking at, screenshot this. How many R's can you count? Is it repetitive, rhythmic, rewarding, respectful, relevant, and does it include relationship? If you are doing some sort of consequence and you cannot plug in at least 2 or 3 of these R's, it is not trauma responsive. If it is punitive, it is not 6 R's. So ask yourself, am I meeting the 6 R's? And then look for rhythm and cadence and start with small doses and trust the seeds that you plant, because it is the small things that make the big differences. So with that, I'm going to ask Mike to come back up and open us up. And I don't think it'll crash the system. It might. I don't know. I don't handle these types of things. You're welcome to pull it up on your phone if you want. Again, might crash the system. This will be a really good test, and my husband will be glad to have the data. But if you go to calmer.creativetherapies.com, or if you just go to my website, creativetherapies.com, you will see a Calmer tab on there, and so this is what you're looking for. You're looking for this, perfect. And can I just get you to stay here? Is that okay? I work on Mac, and I haven't used, I don't know, IBM, I don't even know what this is called, like a Microsoft. This is how out of touch I am with this stuff. I'm afraid I'll hit her trackpad and somehow erase all her emails. Okay, so when you come up to the Calmer, and it's called the Calmer because I was teaching in Norway, and they were like, how do we keep your brain when you leave, Marty? And I was like, I don't know how I can do that. But I brought my husband with me, and he was like, I can do that. I was like, cool, let's do it together. So this is the preview of it. You're going to hit assessment questions. big, bold, and blue, and then hit accept up at the top. This basically, up in the top right, there's like, yeah, keep going there, you go up there, accept. So basically, to keep this HIPAA compliant and make it so that we don't have to charge you $1,000 to keep this website running, I can't keep any information. So as soon as you close out this tab, it is all gone. So you screenshot it, you print it, you save it, whatever you're gonna do on your end, I am not keeping any data from you. So what you're seeing now is Dr. Perry's NMT. Part of that metric is it looks at the different parts of the brain and what the different parts of the brain will control, mediate, or influence. And then we assign behaviors to those. So when we look at this in the brainstem is all about your heart rate, your respirations, your autoimmune functioning is in the brainstem. A lot of food issues, that nutrition and things like that, they're going to be in the brainstem. So they're categorized by the different levels of the brain. That's what makes this neurosequential, right? The neurosequential model. So what we're going to do, and the reason it's called Calmer is because the people in Norway was Kaya, Anne-Marie, Lynn Marie, Marty, and Rob. So it's our initials. So brainstem, I don't know what a normal heart rate is. So you can click that down arrow, if you would, Mike, on the far left. So go back to the left side and see that little arrow, click that. That gives you the normal heart rates. So any of these little arrows you can click, thank you, Mike, and it'll give you a little bit more information on how you're gonna code that. Make sense? So we're gonna have to name it. It won't go unless we name it. So let's go back up to the top and we're just gonna put Utah for the name because that's easy.
How old am I?
How old are you, Utah? Who do we want to talk to? What's that? 4-year-old? All right, 3 to 5. We'll say they're 3 to 5.
3 to 5.
3 to 5-year-old. Okay. So as I'm going through this list, I'm just going to pick random things. So I'm going to say my 4-year-old has big issues with food, but everything else seems pretty good. So go on down to the no concern for food, difficulty with food, number 4. Come back up. And let's just say he's got a pretty moderate concern for that. And he doesn't sleep. Oh my gosh, this 4-year-old doesn't sleep at all. He's making me exhausted. So we're going to put a severe concern there. And he's also lethargic. So number 8, we're going to put that as a moderate because that kid's tired all the time because he never sleeps. So we'll click that. You don't want to pick a too many things, right? If you pick too many things, then the system is like, here's a bazillion things you can try, and you'll be overwhelmed. So do this multiple times and kind of target what's the real priority that you're trying to work on with this kid. So let's just say those are the things we're going to work on. We're going to go all the way down to the bottom. And because frontal cortex, of course he works on impulse and not thought. He's 4. So that's not a concern. 4-year-olds should not be thinking. They don't have cortical functioning yet. So we hit generate report down at the bottom, that blue. Yep. And now it's going to tell you we have the brainstem is difficulty with food, but we've got a lot of diencephalous involvement with this child, right? So we're going to work first on the brainstem, and then we're going to move into the diencephalous. I can't say this word right now, as we're working on our activities. So again, we can click those arrows. So area concern, difficulty with food. Here's how trauma impacts food for some kids. Difficulty with sleep, difficulty with lethargic. So these are just, you can expand all these boxes and kind of tell you why maybe you're having these issues. And then we're going to go down to the indications. So this report indicates difficulty with these things. And then if you are in a home-based place, these are the things that I'm going to recommend to you. And they're going to be hierarched based on brain development and working on that hierarchy. And again, we can expand those. But if you work in the school, then click school. And it's going to give you a different prioritized list because a school is not going to use a nutrition app, but they are going to have recess and things like that. If you're working on nature or farm-based, or if you are in some sort of residential staffed residence. So this is free to the world, and it kind of goes through, and then you can see more if you would like. It'll give you more suggestions. So based on how you fill out the issues you're having with the child you're working with, it will give you an occupational therapy trauma responsive suggestion. You should then maybe take this to your OT, take this to your caseworkers, take it to your family, your 4 people, and sit down and say, oh, wow, it suggested a weighted blanket. This kid's had sexual abuse. Maybe I don't use that one. Like, this is not prescriptive. It is idea generative. So this is my hope to leave with you. If you want to know more about how that was formed, thank you so much, Mike, and all the things. Can we get back to the slide, possibly, please, before you jump down? This book right here breaks it all down, but if you don't want to read this book, you can just read all of the pull-down information in the Calmer. So thank you so much for that. So further learning, these are places you can find me, and then those of you that are staying for the afternoon, we're going to put some of these things into practice and just really have a great time. I don't know, Liz, is there anything else I need to? We got a lot of Lycra, which is my favorite. They call me the Lycra Princess. It's one of my favorite nicknames. Been called a lot of things. That's one of them I like. So there you go. I thank you guys so much for taking your time today to come and hang out with me. I'm so glad that I was able to meet you and spend the morning with you. I really hope that you learned at least one thing that will open your own window of tolerance so that you can help open the windows of the kids that you're working with and the families you serve. So, thank you. And I have 3 more books that are signed. I don't know if somebody wants to come claim those. And I'll sign any books that you want. Yeah.
Yes. So I just want to say that we wanted to let Marty eat lunch. So after the afternoon lab, she's going to do some Q&A, real-time Q&A with you guys. So if you have questions for her, just hold on to those so that she can eat lunch. So she's ready to go for our afternoon together. So you eat lunch, she eats lunch, we're good. Okay, all right, thanks.
I appreciate that. Thank you.